All right, let me make sure. Can you hear me, Jenny, in the space? Let me make sure I can hear you too. Oh, wait, looks like you're muted. Hold on, I'm having an issue. Hold on. Okay. All right, speak again, Jenny. I think I got you now.
You can hear me?
Yep, I hear you fine. Awesome.
Okay.
All right, let me make JJ a speaker. Let's see. Hopefully X cooperates with us today. Oh, you know what? Let me make you a co-host, Jenny, too. I don't know why I don't see JJ as Jenny, can you try making JJ a speaker? I don't know, for some reason it's not working for me. Hey, Daniela, I see you joined. I see David, Michelle, Jackie. If you guys could all please like and repost the space. That way we can get more people in here. Would greatly appreciate it. All right, it looks like we got you up there, JJ. Let's just see if you could unmute there on X. Hopefully we can hear you okay.
Yeah, can you hear me all right?
Yep, I hear you fine. Awesome.
You know, I heard a real quick rebrand for Jennifer, Jenny in the Space.
Jenny in the
From
space.
Jenny from the Block to Jenny in the Space, because I heard you say it. I was like, there's got to be Jenny in the Space, you know?
I love
Jenny
it.
from the Space.
Love it. All right, I'm going to also DM a few people to get them in the space. All right, cool. All right, so I see some other people joining us. Thank you guys all for being here today. Please repost the space. Please like it. We can get more people in the room. For anybody that's new to this space, we just wanted to, I like to start off kind of with an introduction, just explaining a little bit of the background of why we do these. We'll then jump into have Jenny introduce our guest, special guest for today. Then we'll go into like interview style questions. And at the end, we'll open it up for other people that are here in the audience to come up, talk to us, let us know how you're doing, see if you have a question for JJ as well. So I would love to have you participate with us on the space. So this is something I started over a year now, really to shine a spotlight on talented artists who are part of this whole Web3 community. We like to do in-depth interviews to learn more about artists, the artists behind the art. And in the process, we hope to bring greater awareness to the artists, foster new connections, and most importantly, try to inspire people with creative passions to start their own journey in this space. It's a very inclusive space that we have. We welcome artists of all nationalities, all backgrounds, all artistic styles. We go from seasoned professionals to people that are maybe just getting started, and intentionally try to bring a very diverse range of voices from the Web3 community. And we're all about celebrating how art and creativity bring us all together. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny to introduce our special guest for today.
Thank you. JJ Weinberg is a visionary multidisciplinary artist known for his Bob Ross-inspired art and beautifully immersive Frommoville metaverse. He was nominated Best Traditional Artist at NFT NYC in 2021 and has sold his art at prestigious auction house along with the likes of Banksy and Warhol. JJ is a voice in the space as an incredible speaker as well as a podcaster. We are honored to have him join us today. And with that, Giancarlo and I welcome JJ Weinberg to the space.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Oh man, it's our pleasure. I've been really looking forward to this one since we kind of got connected in this space, and yeah, just really excited to get to know you a little bit better, JJ, and just hop right in. So I wanted to really start it off with maybe if you could take like 5 minutes or so, tell us a little bit more about yourself, about your upbringing, and also more importantly, like when you first fell in love with creating art.
Wow. Okay. So, I grew up in a small rural town in the Midwest. And then, but it's really, I'm close to Chicago. So it's kind of a really weird juxtaposition of values and cultures. The melting pot was where I grew up pretty much. And ever since I was 10 years old, I told my mom I was going to go to the American Academy of Art in Chicago. So I've known from an early age that I was called to creativity in every facet. It started with just visual art, drawing and painting. My Bob Ross inspired project. Bob is, in the background of some of that stuff, some of the PBS, like artists showing you how to draw, that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's been my raison d'etre since I can remember. I don't understand how people even can thrive or live without creativity sometimes, because, I always say that it's part alchemy. The philosopher's stone I call myself a wizard of intentional serendipity, and the philosopher's stone in alchemy, they were always looking for the philosopher's stone, which is, what would bring base metals and turn them into gold. And for me, gratitude is the key. That's the philosopher's stone. And I don't mean that in a Pollyannish way that says like we have to hug trees and, love without challenges, because my favorite book is Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. And in The Prophet, he says that love is as much for your pruning as it is for your growth. And so in that regard, gratitude, we have to be grateful even in the hardest times. I mean, it's like, it'd be hard to tell Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, about his experience in Nazi Germany, to just have gratitude. But when you pull back further and we see his contribution with Man's Search for Meaning, we find what, the reason is behind it. So all that said, that's a little bit longer version, I guess, and it sounds tangential, but that's pretty much how my creativity works. Like I'm in the middle of Indra's net, and I try and find all of these jewels that connect one thing to the other. And sometimes I'm doing something absolutely absurd and meme-like and hilarious, and then sometimes I'm challenging social conventions and a whitewashed American fairy tale history. So kind of runs the gamut.
I love it.
But mainly, I guess mainly the answer though is creativity for me. I think that everyone is creative. Like Bob Ross even says that he believes there's an artist hidden at the bottom of every one of us. And I think if you understand that your life is a creative process, even if you aren't a quote unquote artist, you are an artist of your life. Your days are your canvas. Your actions and the way that you move and talk and interact with people are your paint and your brush strokes. And, so we're all creatives, we're all creating. And that's just the way I look at life, is just, it's a full on creative process.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's so true. I love that metaphor, life being a creative process. And I know we've had other artists on here that kind of share in that philosophy, right? That like our lives are, are like a canvas that we're creating, right? As we progress through life. And I know you also, so you've been kind of creative and you started with visual creative art. I think, well, then you went to the American like Art Academy, and then you also started pursuing more of like a musician lifestyle, right? And you started creating music, and then that kind of later on like took off. Can you share a little bit about like then your kind of musical journey that came after as well?
Sure. Yeah. So again, it's really weird, like, because I grew up in this small town. At the time, we didn't have a good basketball team, a football team, but the marching band, went to state. So in a weird flip and twist of fate, being in marching band instead of being the nerdy thing was actually the cool thing. And so I had an older sister, and she was in the marching band. She was just like a stepper, so she would do the flag twirling and all that type of stuff. But I've always pounded on stuff since I was a kid. That's another thing I did. Like I would pound on things, and I would have to be the center of attention at family events and dancing and all that type of stuff. My mom was actually a fitness instructor. And again, fast forward about 25 years and I became a fitness instructor and a personal trainer for a while as well. But anyway, she would, I would be her DJ at the, for her, aerobics classes. And so, and I guess, so this drumming, this constant drumming, this notion that band was the cool thing to do in this small town I grew up in, I actually joined band. We had one elective in middle school, whether it was, I can't remember the three, but I know there was art and band were two of them. And even though I already knew I was going to go to the American Academy of Art, that was my goal in life. I went and I didn't take art as an elective in middle school. I took band. So I was a drummer, I was first chair in drumming and I did that a lot. And funny side note, you may have seen that I just got fired from the band Slipknot. It's been on the news everywhere. I tell people, I say, that's why I wear the mask, right? Because if you Google Jay Weinberg, it's a funny side thing. So people in the space know me as JJ. A lot of people more local know me as just Jay, Jay. But my mom wanted to call me JJ growing up. So I was named after my grandfather and my dad. And but at some point, JJ seemed juvenile to me in some weird way. So I dropped one J and this was JAY for the longest time. But then as I'm doing this musical journey, and you do the thing where you have to Google yourself and see where you're at on that whole thing. I'm looking up Jay Weinberg, and unbeknownst to me, when I was a kid, I used to tell people Max Weinberg, who was Bruce Springsteen's drummer, E Street Band, and he was on Conan O'Brien. Many people probably remember him from there. I would say, oh yeah, Max Weinberg, that's my uncle, just joking and messing around. Well, another 20 years later, I come to find out that Max Weinberg's son's name is Jay Weinberg. And he's the drummer for Slipknot. So it's like he just got fired from the band or they let him go or however the heck that went. But, they all wear the masks in Slipknot. So, But anyway, so yeah, the musical thing, I was always drumming on stuff. And then when I got into art school and I met my best friend, Tony, we would skip a lot of life drawing classes. We're in downtown Chicago, just kind of like soaking it in, skipping class here and there. And we would, be in the hallways banging on stuff. And growing up, like, again, I had this really weird experience. When I was in high school, I listened to Tupac almost exclusively. That was my go-to choice for music, and I was listening to a lot of rap music, but because I grew up in this kind of white suburban area, I didn't have any connection to actual hip hop. I didn't know what hip hop was. And then when I got into art school and I was surrounded by people who grew up with, Common and Mos Def and Gang Starr and the actual real hip hop music. And they look at my catalog, they're like, yo, you got to get some hip hop in this. This isn't, And so after discovering that, it just set me down a journey with the music where at first Tony and I just started kind of rapping in the hallways as a joke, freestyling about, just stuff that was happening in class or whatever else. And then, I'd always done a lot of writing along with my artwork and my creativity, and I'd done a lot of reading. And I had an affinity for music and performance, I think, in general. And so it just kind of started to blossom into something where it's like, oh, wait, this is something for real. And then one of the things that I observed, again, growing up in this town and then seeing that I was like the only person who was really been listening to rap music at that time in my area, I started to see how these different cliques and things, evolve in high school and that type of thing. And it's an early observation, I guess, just of the way that people generally move towards in groups or whatever. But there's people listening to Dave Matthews Band, and then there's the Korn guys, and then there's this one person that was listening to rap music, which was me. But like, so when we started the music, it started as hip hop, but it was always under the idea that what if we brought all music together? It's like now it sounds like duh, But at the time I was literally doing, trying to produce music that had country vibes and hip hop, because nobody was doing it yet at that point in time. And I just thought, like, what if now it's not uncommon for, Garth Brooks and Lil Wayne to do a track. But at that point in time, that was my vision, because I thought, well, if you could bring different, diverse musical cultures together, maybe you could bring people together of different walks of life, And overarchingly, that's probably one of my main themes through my work and creativity is just, communication and trying to bring people together through story.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's funny, like when you're mentioning that, because I'm a type of person that actually really I like a really wide range of music. So, and I got a lot of different influences. Like a cousin of mine that I grew up with when I lived with my grandmother, he went to a school where actually most people were listening to like hip hop music and rap. And so ever since I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, I was listening to Biggie, to Tupac, to, NWA, like all these different like groups. But then I also had like other friends that were into like Nirvana, Metallica, so on one hand, I'd be like, depending on my mood, I'd be either jamming to like hip hop music, or I'd have like heavy rock playing, or my mom, was really into like Latin music, salsa, merengue, and my grandmother too. And so, yeah, so I just got like all these different sources, and I enjoyed it, all of it. It's very different, but I really loved it. And so whenever I see like musicians or artists that would blend different styles, it always like fascinated me, like, oh wow, like things kind of crossing over, and seeing more of that nowadays too is just so cool, to just kind of see those things getting bridged, because I feel like a lot of times things get kind of boxed into like one genre or another, but it's really cool when things kind of like step outside those molds, right? And just do something very different, that challenges that. So that's so cool. And so I know then you kind of progressed in like a musical career, but then somewhere around like 2016, I believe, right? You founded actually a platform to support artists called Art Unity. And I love that you described it as like Instagram meets GoFundMe. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about like that platform, how it then kind of reconnected you to visual art, and also how it led you to NFTs and this whole Web3 space.
Absolutely, yeah. So like, it's really crazy. It was around 2015 when the idea kind of found me, and I was, we were doing the music. We had some commercials, like some licensing overseas, like all these things. I want to go back just real quick to something that you were talking about, the diversity of music. As advice to artists, is one thing that I try and tell people, because I am the example, I'm the living proof that if you try to be too diverse before people know you for one thing, then you shoot yourself in the foot. So try and get your one lane first. Beatles early on weren't doing the White Album, is the analogy I always say. You got to do the White Album later on. I unfortunately tried to do the White Album as my debut experience in all of my creativity. But anyway, so we were doing the music. I think we had our last show, and we were doing decent in our area, like House of Blues, Chicago. We headlined the House of Blues, the Metro, a lot of the places where like I'd seen other artists play and stuff. And it's a kind of a surreal experience when you're knowing that you're in the green room that some of the people that you look up to are in. And so that was really cool for a time. But I was struggling, like I was living the starving artist cliche. We had a little bit of success, but you're kind of trying to stitch wins together in between some downtime. And I had my energy bill was due, and I needed like $150 yesterday, and I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'd been doing a little bit of my art with the band only for the branding stuff. Like I was doing all the show posters, all of the like visual things, creating the merch and all that type of stuff. But I hadn't really been doing a lot of drawing, hadn't painted in, probably a decade. But I was like, you know what, I've got to do something. And so I had this idea. I remember Game of Thrones was on, it was getting ready to come back out. And Tyrion Lannister is my favorite character on Game of Thrones. So I'm like, I'm going to do this colored pencil illustration. And I posted it on my Facebook, my Instagram, Snapchat. Had a real big following on Snapchat at the time because, like I said, I was doing the personal training for a while, and we would do these personal training stories every day where like people would follow along our workouts. So I was using all of those different things, and I said basically that I needed 10 $15 donations. And once I reached 15 donations, I was going to randomly select somebody to win the illustration. Right, because I didn't have an audience built up for my artwork at that time. I wasn't selling art. I wasn't selling prints. I wasn't selling anything in the visual art space. So I'm like, I'll do this and get it done. And it was like instantaneously. I had messages. People were ready for it. But the problem was like things I was doing with the band, meeting people to sell them tickets. I'm like meeting people in the Kmart parking lot like I'm fucking Walter White or something. You know what I mean? So it's like some sort of deal's going down. So I get all these, sold, and then I'm like, man, this is something. Like, what if that were a platform? What if that were sticky that had, a whole different ecosystem that could develop in it? And so then I started thinking about it, and I was like, the reason I stepped away from the music was, one, there were some people in the band that kind of left and had different things that they had to do. And then two, because I saw like, I got to make a living, and I've got to be able to sell my creativity no matter what. And when Artunity came to me, that's actually how I pronounce it, and I'll tell you how the word even came to me for the brand. I was like, if someone did this half as good as it is in my mind right now, I wouldn't even be like upset that somebody did it. I would just be like, I can use it as an artist, and I'm going to use it for what I'm doing. And early in my business plan, so this is how I got into NFTs through Artunity. In my early business plan, I think 2015, 2016, one of the aspects was of the platform is that it would be kind of more like, for a collector side, it's more like Pinterest. So like if you like somebody's work, it would hang in a gallery and a wall for something that you liked. And then if you donated to the piece of artwork, then it would show up with a different sort of frame on it. And then if you actually won the piece through the random selection after the piece was funded, then it would show up with this gold frame. And so I had this idea of creating the gold frame gallery where, say you're a barista and you want a painting that's worth $40,000, and you're an artist and you want to go to art school, and you're like, I really love this piece and I really love this artist, but I could really use the money for my art school, So you could put it back into the Artunity ecosystem and leverage that artist that has this massive following. At the time, I was talking to an artist named Ashley Longshore on Instagram. She's got 300,000 followers. She sells paintings for $40,000, but 299,998 of her followers can't afford a $40,000 painting, but they could donate $5 to her. And this is again before NFTs, all of this stuff. So I in the gold frame gallery, the notion that the person who won the piece could leverage that other artist's massive following to their benefit. Then the artist would actually, in my business plan, says for the first time in history, an artist would get a royalty payment on a secondary sale, right? And so this is again before a blink of NFT at all. And so in 2019, I won People's Choice for Startup of the Year with Artunity. I was getting some traction. I had some early investment in the platform, but then I hit like a brick wall with the tech and the development because it costs so much. I mean, as you can imagine. Now, of course, with AI, there's a lot of things that could maybe be, a lot of costs might be able to be mitigated or brought down. And it's still part of my legacy. It's still something that I think about building because the writing is on the wall. When I see so many different things, like Jen, you were in that space of the Collector's Corner yesterday and the Rebel XYZ, and I see all these things, I'm like, the writing is there. It's like people are even doing raffles and stuff like that. So it's like, with this to be the actual spot where you do it, and the fact that it would be sticky and have its own culture, it would be centralized to a degree. You know, I know we talk about decentralization in this space, but like part of the decentralization means that things like OpenSea taking away artist royalties can happen. But if it, and within the community can vote on whether or not, you know, we should skin them. But like the idea behind Artunity, when I was coming up with the name, just to give you an example of the way like serendipity and the magic works in my life and the way that I create, I had this idea and I was trying to come up with a name for it. And as a musician and a songwriter and just a writer in general, I had like 300 names, and I was trying to be clever. I knew it wasn't working because I was trying. And that's what happens so often. The most time when we try we think we're being clever, we think we're being smart. That's when we come up with it's not as good. So I sat it down, I was looking at this piece of paper, and I just remember asking myself, I said, what is this? Just what is it at its core? And it's like, and I heard this whisper say, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for new artists to leverage their friends and family at $5 and $10 increments for low things to be able to pay for canvas, right? And it's an opportunity for an artist that has a lot of followers to connect with their following base that might not be able to afford expensive work from them in a new dynamic way. So I'm like, it's this opportunity. So then I was looking at the word opportunity, and I'm telling you, before my eyes, looking at it on the page, I watched the O in the middle of the word opportunity turn to an A. And I said, opportunity. And then I saw the other O turn to an A, and it said app opportunity. And I was like, holy shit, that's what it is, Artunity. And then when you break the word away, the way that you pronounced it at the beginning, Giancarlo, was Art Unity, which is, it's embedded in all of it. And then if you look at the branding for it, the logo that I ended up creating, it looks kind of like an Adobe thing, to be honest, a little bit, just because of the nature of it. It's AU, which is on the periodic table of elements, is a symbol for gold, right? And then that brings us right back to, you know, the mythology of alchemy and gratitude and the philosopher's stone again. You know what I mean? So
beautiful.
And like if you go into Promoville, well, I'm sure we'll talk about Promoville a little bit, but if you go into Promoville, you'll see Artunity is there. Like I have a storefront for Artunity. My legacy play, like everything that I do is deeply intentional. I don't move without intention. And it's whether or not it plays out, whether or not I have enough, you know, time on the planet to get it all done remains to be seen. But the ambition is large. One thing I don't understand and I don't know is I hear people say, what do you do when you get creative block? Because I've never experienced that ever in my life. In fact, I have way too much creativity that if like I could pawn some off to people, I'd love to like, here, take some of mine. So
that's funny. You have creative bottleneck. You have an abundance of it.
It's absolutely true, Jen. Yeah, I mean, and it takes me back again to the spirit thing, though. You know, we should live in abundance. The Upanishads say that he took abundance from abundance, and abundance still remained. But we in the scarcity mentality that the culture, not really NFTs, we get a little bit closer to this abundance mentality, I think, in NFTs and blockchain and Web3. But the idea is that, you know, there's not enough and someone's going to take this attention from me or yada, yada, yada. And that to a degree, it's true. Like social media is an attention economy. Like what you guys are providing me right now, I guarantee you there's at least one other artist that will catch this and be like, man, that's messed up. I want to be where he's at. I want to be on that interview. I want to be talking to Giancarlo and Jen. I have something to offer. And you know why I know that? Because that was me. I literally thought that watching you guys talk to other artists. You know what I mean? So it's like it goes again, not to be Pollyannish when I say that I have gratitude. I have gratitude, but I also am a human being, and I do measure and we are going to calculate and say, well, man, why is this person moving and I'm not? Especially if you've dedicated your life and your hours to it. It's a challenging thing. But then again, that's where we have to lean into finding the key of gratitude and finding some alchemy in our experience. and where does it take us? Like, but I don't want to miss this just in case we do, and it's not in your guys' agenda or notes. But back to the music thing, in 2008, I wrote the song in 2006 called Price Gouging, right? And it was a tongue-in-cheek sounding thing. It sounded kind of like a parody, like a Bob Ross thing. But underneath the layers, it was a very specific social, political criticism of dependency on fossil fuel, full dependency on fossil fuel with no question. And, I was talking about electric cars. This is in 2008. And again, in my neck of the woods, as it is, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were campaigning for the Democratic vote because this part of Indiana, it was major, like Northwest Indiana, it was a major part of how it could swing for them. So they were like literally in town, right? And I had written this song in 2006 called Price Gouging. And watching the culture and the zeitgeist of times, I was like, you know what? You have to poke someone in the eye sometimes and do something controversial. And it really kind of harkens back to Good Trouble. Like if you think about Dr. Martin Luther King and sit-ins and all of these type of things. And I don't want to elevate it to that level, but it is an inspiration for me, right? So I decided I'm going to get on top of the roof of a gas station and sing my protest song, Price Gouging. Okay. And I do it with the intention, again, it was all planned. We went up there, even the time that I went on the roof of the gas station was at 4:51 p.m., which is a part of 451 is my number. We may talk about that, but 4:51 p.m. I had groups and pockets. It was flash mobs before I knew what a flash mob was, where I had groups of 5 people in 5 different locations, one being a lookout to make sure that the police weren't going to stop me from getting up there in the first place, right? And then 2, after I got up there and started playing in like 2 or 3 minute intervals, these groups of 5 people were to come over to look like a fabricated crowd, right? And then once the fabricated crowd is there, the actual crowd builds because people can't help themselves but to look at what is happening. So, traffic's backed up and all this. And so, I fully knew that I was going to get arrested, but then they had to bring, first the cops were telling me to get down. Well, I can't get down. I got up there with a bucket truck. I can't just jump. So then they have to bring the fire trucks, but then the fire trucks I knew was going to give me enough time for a little bit more potential press to get there and all those type of things. And so long story short of it, I go to jail. I get out of jail. That was my one mistake. Honestly, people ask, but what's one thing that you would have done differently in life? One of my top things that I would have done differently is stayed in jail. Like I shouldn't have got bailed out within like 6 hours. I should have stayed in jail. And then the story could have built a little bit bigger, right? But I mean, after that, it was like, after I got out, the press, it was crazy. I was doing, newspaper interviews across, like globally, like crazy type of stuff. And then, it was on Good Morning America for a spot. I was on Howard Stern's radio station with Jay Thomas, Chicago News, this and that. And through it all, I started looking at some of the responses online from people. And, people, oh, he's so stupid. Doesn't he know that the gas station doesn't make any money off of the gas? They make it off the convenience. Like, these are all things I know, because again, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to read about it. I'm going to intentionalize. I'm going to go deep as I can. But so trying to think of something else to do, I was like, you know what? I'm going to ride a bicycle, basically from Chicago to Washington, D.C. Now, I wasn't a cyclist. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was probably 12 years old or something. But I'm like, I'm going to do this. And the point is, I'm going to ride on my own energy to the Washington, D.C. and play my song in front of the White House. So it's like almost 700 miles. So I didn't have a bike. I went locally. I showed the bike shop. Here's my, here's my like newspaper article. Here's Chicago Tribune. Here's this and that. He's like, I can't give you a bike. Are you crazy? So instead of tucking my tail between my legs, I'm like, well, who's the biggest bike company I can think of? So I'm like, Trek. Trek is a big bike company. So I called Trek, and long story short, they send me out a $1,500 road bike. Say, do it. So I ride a bike, almost 700 miles from my house, the front of my house, to the White House. And, when I recorded the song, I think we spent like 35 hours in the studio recording this song. It was the first song that I really took properly into the studio. And we're recording the song, and after it was all said and done, I wanted to get it mastered the right way. And the guy that was the mixing engineer had interned with a guy named Doug Sachs. He's like this Grammy award-winning mastering engineer. He did like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, Dixie Chicks, all this stuff. And so he sent him the song. He said, he wants to do this with you. He wants you to master it, but they need to know, like, what's it going to cost, because they've already spent a lot of time in the studio. He told them the whole thing about me getting arrested and what I was going to be doing. And he's like, just send it out to me and I'll send it back to you. So crazy thing, he did it pro bono, which apparently he never does ever. He never would do things pro bono. But he just loved the story and how it sounded kind of like the hippie 60 days type of stuff. And so I did that. And all of this, the reason why I'm telling this story is because the idea and the notion that, for a time, like he said to me on the phone when he was mastering the song, he goes, sounds like you got a hit record on your hand to me, my friend. Right? This is Doug Sachs, who's mastered Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. He was working on a Jackson Browne album when I sent it to him. Like, that's crazy to hear that. And then have a little bit of a bump, but still kind of slide into relative obscurity, right? Because for all intents and purposes, I think I shouldn't be telling you guys this story. You should know it already, right? But the reason why I say finding the alchemy in all of that is to say that, like, looking at you, Giancarlo, Jen, Sweet Baby Jesus, just through a heart, Studio Paymon, Carlos, Janine, so just people I can see on the stage right now, I might not know any of you if my path went that way. And it might sound, again, Pollyannish or hocus pocus, but I so deeply value you guys and the connections that I've made and the friendships that I know that it's just going to happen for me in the way that it's supposed to happen in its time. So.
Absolutely, JJ. I definitely believe that. And I don't think it's Pollyannish at all. And it actually makes me think about Bob Ross and how Bob also wasn't recognized during his life in the way that he should. And actually, it kind of brings me to my next question, which is that you draw a lot from Bob Ross. And I'm curious why. Why do you believe that his art and his message are so important?
I think it's, first of all, like I said, when I was 10 years old, I remember like, oh, I want to paint like this guy. And I tried to paint and I failed miserably, and so it goes back to that. And then a couple of days ago, I posted on Twitter, actually, there was this 10, 11-year-old girl. She came into the gym. I own this gym with my uncle, and we're working on this rebuild and this rebrand. And she came in, she wanted to give me $5 for some stickers because she saw, or $1 for 5 stickers. And I didn't even know what she was talking about. So I'm like, we don't have stickers. What does she mean? But we have these stickers for tanning. And I think maybe the eye thing. So I was like, oh, that's what she's talking about. But I said, we don't have stickers, but I think I have a sticker. I go, do you know who Bob Ross is? She goes, yeah. And she lit up and like smiled. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. Because, you never know. Sometimes people still don't know who Bob Ross is, even if they're older. But I was like, to see this little girl light up and the fact that she knew Bob Ross, I was like, that is amazing. So I give her one of my, promo stickers. And so with Bob, like, I originally started the project in 2014. So like, if you go on a lot of the branding, like the shirt that I'm wearing, if you're watching on the YouTube, it's the Bobber Shop, Happy Little Hairdos, and it says like art and NFT since 2014, which, like, of course, NFTs didn't exist like that in 2014. But for me, the reason why I brought this project into the space is just because it absolutely made the most sense. Like, it started for me as an idea for a parody coffee table book, right? Happy Little Hairdos. And I had Bob's face, and I had this idea to, give him mohawk, give him cornrows, go through different things of like pop culture, film, and music. and comic books. Like, these are all the things as a creative person that, you know, make up who I am. I mean, Back to the Future 2 is my favorite movie of all time, probably, right? And so I get to see Bob as Doc Brown and Marty McFly. And I guess at the inception of it, it was really just because Bob is such a pop culture like icon, and the notion that he brought joy to people. In that regard, he's such an anomaly, because so much of, again, when I did the price gouging thing, the gas station thing, it was because I got arrested, you know, because I poked somebody in the eye. But Bob, his legacy continues because of his joy. Like, I saw somewhere somebody call him the secular saint. And I'm like, man, that's so perfect. Like, he would talk about spiritual and magical things as he's doing this painting, you know, and telling people that they can move mountains, you know. And so I think that's a large part of just me wanting to continue to try and be a small part of continuing Bob's legacy. But then, like, it continues to blossom. Like, it would take us 4 of these shows 2 hours long each for me to really spell out everything about it, because it goes deep. I mean, like I said, if there's one that I did of Bob looking like Steve Jobs, right? And he's holding an iPhone up, and if you look at it, it's got this Inception metaverse layers upon layers upon layers, because he's holding up the phone, and on the phone is the NFT of himself on OpenSea. And then if you keep seeing it on the phone, it keeps stacking down and mirroring like a hall of mirrors, right? But if you look at this, Steve Jobs as Bob Ross, if you don't know it's Bob, you just think that it's Steve. It just looks like Steve Ross. Or, I mean, not Steve Ross. Steve Ross is his son, which is a whole other thing, which is crazy, because I got to paint with Steve, his son, and that's a whole wild story. But it looks like Steve Jobs. And so it's just the question of identity. Like, what does it mean? Like, right now I'm growing out my hair again. Like, my hair, if you're on the YouTube, you can see how my hair is kind of getting a little bit longer. Back when I did the price gouging thing, my hair was probably down. I was more like the hippie look, you know, and I would get people coming up to me and say, hey man, you know where I can get some good stuff? Like, literally, it's like, these are brands. It's weird that means something, but like, people would ask me. And like, side little note, I've never had a drop of alcohol or done a drug in my life. Like, not a stitch, not one thing, right? Part of that is because I grew up with an alcoholic father, and you know, my neuro association with it was different than most. But you know, so I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is Bob was imprisoned to his afro, right? And it's also the kind of the calamity of the notion that, like, Bob, you know, he didn't make a single cent from the PBS show. Like, he donated. Every show that you see was donated. That was just him giving. He made his money from the brand, right? But then if you're not aware, you should watch the Netflix documentary, which again serendipitously released the same year that I brought Bob onto the blockchain. It's called Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed. And so when I first started doing this Bob Ross thing, I knew under parody, like, I had parody protection to do whatever I wanted with it, right? But when I was looking at trying to turn this into a coffee table book and a parody thing, I knew at that time I want to reach out to the family, because I know Steve. I've seen Steve. I don't know him. Well, I do now, but at the time I knew he painted on the show with his dad and this and that. So I'm like, I want to do the right thing. So I want to reach out. So when I come into 2021 early on, and I'm like seeing this whole NFT space for the vision of CryptoPunks, because I honestly, Happy Hairdos started as an NFT project before Bored Apes even came out, you know, so it was a weird thing to be in the middle of all that Me Too PFP stuff, you know what I mean? Because for me, the Happy Hairdos isn't a PFP project. It has PFP, everything about it, as, you know, all of that written all over it, but it's more than that. It's just a gateway into this idea, right? But again, like, because it had already pre-existed. So I lost my own train of thought here.
You were saying that you reached out to the son.
Oh yeah, so I was going to reach out to the family, and I didn't know how to get in touch. So then I think it's like Firefly Branding or something is the Bob Ross Inc. holder, and I literally sent emails. Like, I still have the emails. I said, hey, so I'm working on this project. You know, I really want to do this the right way. I know I with parody, like, I can do this, but I want to give back to the family. And at the time, I was like, they don't know about NFTs. They don't know about this Web3 thing. And like, obviously you can see, as much as I am an artist, I really am a technologist too. I dig the idea of building business and brand through Web3. And I'm like, I want to be able to consult this family, Bob Ross Inc., on the notion of how they could bring the joy of painting onto the blockchain. Like, literally get episodes for sale, segments, doing segments of the episodes. There's a whole creative thing. I don't even want to say it because I don't want Bob Ross Inc. to know about it, because that's the whole point. Then I see in the middle of this, I'm working and I see this Netflix. The way I found out about it is I'm working on Happy Hairdos. I'm doing all these assets. The original drawing is actually a colored pencil illustration. You guys can maybe see it. It's back there behind me. And that's part of the collection, actually. Everybody who, it's kind of the opportunity element of Happy Hairdos. Everybody who owns a Happy Hairdo, when this project eventually finally finds its light and sells out, everyone also has a raffle ticket to win the original piece. So it's a colored pencil illustration from 2014. But when I went to Procreate in 2021 to start doing the majority of the assets for the collection, I was sitting in my basement and I'm like, well, I'm going to put on, what better background noise than, the joy of painting? I'll put on some Bob Ross. And I knew it was on Netflix, so I pull up my Netflix account. But unbeknownst to me, they had taken it off. It must have run its contract course or whatever. But I see this placeholder because I searched Bob Ross for this documentary that's going to come out in a couple of months called Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed. And then I'm like, what in the hell does this mean? So then I start Googling Happy Accidents, Betrayal, Greed, da-da-da-da. And I get the short version of the story, which is that Bob Ross's ex-business partners basically stole the brand. I don't know if you're familiar with Ray Kroc. There's a great movie called Founder.
Yeah, it's
about the way,
McDonald's.
about the McDonald's. And there's two sides to every story. I mean, like Karate Kid's another one of my favorite movies, right, of all time. And I'm obviously a person from the 70s and 80s. I was born in 78, so it's like I grew up through the 80s and 90s. But the Cobra Kai thing, which is so great. I don't know if anybody's seen the Cobra Kai thing, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it's the beauty of it, even though it's like corny and cheesy and all that stuff from the 80s and 90s and that, it's the brilliance of Cobra Kai is it shows you the reverse angle and says, wait a second, things aren't as black and white as we think. Like, when you start to empathize for the first time with Johnny Lawrence, you're like, holy shit. I didn't think about that. The new kid in town, the hot new kid, comes in and steals my girlfriend. Yo, that's crazy. Like, if you told that story from that way, Daniel LaRusso would have always been the bad guy.
Yep, for sure.
It's crazy. So we got to think about those things and process that. So anytime I'm being critical, I'm always open to the conversation. You know what I mean? I'm open to have a conversation about, what this means. My Chanel art, Jenny, about my whole, rabbit hole with the gallery and some of my lost work and this whole notion of Chanel being a Nazi spy. Again, it's about conversation. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's not just sweep it under the rug, and let's not just be on fire about things when it's convenient for us, when it's easy, because that guy's obviously the villain, you know what I mean? Or that girl's obviously the bad person. Let's make sure that we're equal in our expenditure of our, justice, right? So anyway, it comes back to this family, because I've read some stuff recently about the family saying, well, that's not exactly how it happened and yada, yada, yada. It still sounds like it's pretty much how it happened. But the reality of what the documentary points to is that they stole the brand and the name from the family, and that Steve Ross, Bob's son, doesn't see any of the proceeds from it. And so all of a sudden I'm like, well, great. Now I'm going to use the parody production from Happy Little Hairdos for sure to give the middle finger to Bob Ross Inc. and see how I can, figure out doing stuff with Steve. And then to that point, one of the miraculous moments of this whole journey was in 2022, early April 2022. I got to paint with Steve. And he had these like little workshop seminars where he does just like his dad, just like he did on The Joy of Painting. Walks you through painting. What's super crazy is the painting I did. I think it's back there if you can see it, Giancarlo. The painting I did with Steve actually then became a rare background in the Happy Little Hairdos collection. So it's like this hall of mirrors that keeps going back. But I painted with Steve and I got to show him the project and talk to him about stuff. And he just loved it. He was like, this is absolutely great. He goes, look at that. You got a conehead, Bob. And I was like, conehead, Bob, that's your dad, bro. Like, so weird to just hear him say it, And then I talked to Sally Shank. So if you watch the documentary, Sally's in the documentary. She was one of Bob's really good friends. And she directed every episode of The Joy of Painting. And I showed her and I told her how I was like, I dress up as Bob. I do like this cosplay Bob kind of thing. And, I was going to Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago, which is the largest. It's really one of the largest in the States for, cancer patients, children cancer patients. And, Bob, again, a lot of the stuff I learned as I kept going deeper and deeper into his legacy and who he was as a person. He died of lymphoma at such an early age. And so, and the documentary talks about that too, and how like to his last day, he was cranking out episode after episode, trying to be with the kids. He didn't wear his frustrations on his sleeve. You know what I mean? A lot of people might not know this, but he actually started as a drill sergeant in the Air Force, like a drill sergeant type of person. And it's really, he would scream at people, notorious for being just a hard ass, really mean, nasty, screaming at people. And he vowed that he would never raise his voice again after he left the Air Force, right? So I like one of the NFTs in the collection is actually based off of that. I have all these different like storytelling elements and trying to, find out who this person is. But I say all that because, Sally, when I told her about the children's hospital thing and just kind of trying to follow along in these footsteps, she started crying and she's like, Bob would have loved this. He would have loved you. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm like, man, that sealed the deal for me. Like that was it, because there was a point in time in 2021 when I was trying to get a hold of Steve and trying to figure out a way to, make sure that this was okay and right. And I couldn't. And there was a little bit of like hesitation on my part. And that could have been part of stalling some of this project as well, because I was like, man, I want to make sure this is right and done right, And so to hear someone who sat with Bob on every episode of The Joy of Painting tell me he would have loved this, he would have loved you, and then to be able to go and be with the kids and kind of talk to them like Bob would and do that and kind of push that spirit forward. And then, fast forward another year and I have a 10-year-old girl telling me she knows who Bob is. I mean, so all of that, it goes back to, I have another in the collection. The ones in the collection that are really special are called curated cuts. And they're the ones that like I built by hand and I drew every one of the assets specific for that piece. And they have one-of-one elements that you won't find anywhere else. And one of them is Vincent van Gogh. So it's Bob as Van Gogh. And again, it really just looks like a caricature illustration of Van Gogh. It doesn't look like Bob Ross anymore. He's holding up his ear on the picture and he's got like the pipe and as from the portrait of Dr. Gachet or one of his self-portraits, not the portrait of Dr. Gachet, but one of his self-portraits where he's wearing this, the bandage on his ear and everything still. And the juxtaposition of Van Gogh, and Van Gogh was actually the kind of in my branding for Artunity, because he's the poster child of the starving artist. And so the idea was always, if you gave a chance for Van Gogh to use the technology, would he have had to die penniless, and unknown? But so this juxtaposition of Bob and Van Gogh, it's like you have Vincent van Gogh, who died penniless, and the portrait of Dr. Gachet years after his death sells for $85 million, right? Tragic. Then you have Bob, who gave away all of his work and his painting and his time, but then because of his brand, was a millionaire. Like, people don't realize that's, again, part of Bob's grace and part of the way I aspire to be. Because, like, money, I had this weird relationship with money because in my family, I grew up around a family business. In that small town, they were self-made millionaires, retail, selling, Jews that came to the middle of the cornfield for who knows what reason, but they found themselves there and made this, fortune. But then my great uncle Harold, like, his name is on the side of the gymnasium. Legacy matters a lot to me, obviously. His name's on the side of the gymnasium because he gave back so much to the community. Like, to this day, I have grown men when they run into me and they'll say, I couldn't put food on the table if it weren't for your uncle. I wouldn't have been able to feed my family. I wouldn't be able to put shoes on my kids' feet. And so when I think about legacy, Bob, he lived like my uncle did in many ways. Like, that's the North Star for me, because my uncle was a self-made millionaire, but he was fully charitable. You know what I mean? And so in that regard, money is just energy, and he was able to, siphon that energy to proper places. But also growing up, because I grew up in that family it was a lot of stereotypical warring Jews fighting over money. It was really bad. And so, like, I got to see the worst of it. I mean, my mom got death threats from people in my family and was told to leave town. This kind of stuff happened. It's like Shakespearean in some way, right? But so I had this averse relationship where for many, many years, money was just the root of evil to me, that whole cliche, right? And of course, the adoration and the love of money at all costs can be the root of evil, but money is just energy. And if we use energy properly, we can siphon it. So when I look at Bob, again, I didn't even think about this until like late in 2021, as I was thinking about Bob. Actually, I was in Santa Monica at the time. It was right after I did this event, this George Lopez charity event thing. And it just hit me. I was walking on the street. I'll never forget the moment. And I was like, yeah, that's it. Bob, like, he also held his fortune with grace. Like, people don't think about Bob being a millionaire. He was literally one of the most successful living artists of all time. But then after he dies, it all goes away. So it's like, you got Van Gogh who can't make a dime, right? And then 85 million. Then you've got Bob, who through the branding structure becomes wealthy and then has it all taken away, right? So how does the artist win? When do we get our chance? You know what I mean? To just thrive. So because again, like I said, I've never done any drugs. I don't smoke, I don't drink, and I don't judge people who do by any means. But like, for me, I always say serendipity is my psychedelic, and I kind of go down that rabbit hole. But I guess what I'm saying there is, I lost what I was going to say. I'm lost. I forgot it. Sorry. That happens from time to time when my mind's fragmenting to a thousand different places. I can't remember it. Anyway, I digress.
No, you're good, JJ. And that was an amazing, just amazing explanation, about Bob Ross, the significance, the things that artists have to go through. You even touched on things that made me think about extrinsic and intrinsic value. I've also been having a lot of these like sort of conversations with my close circle of friends, just even internal dialogues that I have. And everything that you hit on is just like so spot on and has so much intentionality and so much meaning. And actually, one of the questions that I had for you was that because many of your physical pieces of art, they carry messages, meaning, history. in particular, the No 9 collection, and you touched on that briefly, as well as the Well-Regulated Militia, are both tied to historical figures and moments. And I was hoping maybe you could share with us the meaning and inspiration behind those artworks.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. One thing I do remember as I went on those tangents there, that I wanted to talk about, and it's something that, with the joy, before we leave from Bob here, is you, Jenny, were super inspirational to me to wind up bringing Frida Kahlo into my Bob Ross project. And I also just the other day got another little whisper in the wind that I need to do Bob Skiat, which is basically I'm going to do the same thing with Bob Skiat. It'll be his face with different hairstyles, different things. Because really at the end of the day, when you came to Fromoville and went through the metaverse, and I was able to share the story, that was the time. That was the moment when I realized, and we've talked about this before in different spaces, that like the feminine energy and the ability to tell story is something that I think is really, really needed, especially in this space. I grew up with, again, I told you my dad was an alcoholic, and I grew up with a single mom. So like I've always embraced my feminine energy. As an artist, I do that. But like the reason why it made me think of it is because as much as Bob was the joy of painting, Frida could be called the sorrow of painting. So it's super crazy. So I wanted to touch on that real quick. But as far as my number 9, the Chanel collection, the Well-Regulated Militia, those are definitely along the lines of what I talk about when I talk about my like legacy art, and why it's strange because I have such a diverse kind of palette of things that I'm going after. I mean, like I said, I read a lot. I do love history, and more so than loving history, I'm fascinated with trying to cut through the cult of personality and understand branding and truth and how it affects politics and social convention, and how it shifts the Overton window. I don't know if you're familiar with the Overton window, but this idea of what's acceptable, how it moves backwards and forwards. And so really the Well-Regulated Militia and the All That Glitters, number 9, Sleeping with the Enemy, those both kind of really started to develop at the same time around 2019 for me. The All That Glitters Chanel series spawned after I read this book, Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel's Secret War. I see on the YouTube, you're on the website. Like you can see the little trailer for the mini documentary on my website. It's just jjweinberg.com. And it talks about, how essentially, I read this book, Sleeping with the Enemy, Coco Chanel's Secret War, and it's about how she was a Nazi spy. I mean, there was a dossier, it's some documents that came out in 2011 that this writer, he was a war writer, Hal Vaughan. He actually, a correspondent, he actually was the one who kind of blew this whole thing wide open with this book. And when I saw it, I was like, wow, that's really incredible. And of course, like I said before, certain amount of even my own makeup, I was drawn to the controversy. Well, what does that mean? Chanel was a Nazi. Like, I got to look that up. There's something in us that we just latch onto. So I read the book, and, I come to find out, I mean, she had a lot of homophobia and a lot of these things that you just would not expect. And I was like, wow, this is really crazy. But it really kind of gelled for me as an idea to start to do a body of work around it, because not just because of the Chanel thing on its own, but because, again, the cult of personality and what I'd seen in Basil's coming up, Art Miami, huge, right? And in that scene, I would see a lot of this. And again, I go out, sometimes I might sound a little judgmental, but hey, I'm an artist, right? We all have our opinions. So I don't want to offend anyone too deeply, but I would see these paintings of like Donald Duck with the Gucci and Mickey Mouse with Chanel. And all told, they were just hollow, like from an artistic perspective, from what I could see, it was like, one, the painting technique wasn't even that fantastic. It wasn't even that well done. But it was mainly just leaning on IP. So it's like, and here's a person who's using Bob Ross and a bunch of crazy comic book characters, and but it's like, what's the intention behind it? You know what I mean? I'm not just about IP is okay, but like, if all you're selling, Picasso once said that when people buy art, mostly they buy a coat cut to the measure of their own ignorance. And I've always taken that to mean Picasso saying that, yeah, people don't really even understand what they're doing. They just they show you their colors by what they're buying, in a sense, right? Because obviously what we collect and buy is a reflection in some sort of way. But when I would see this stuff selling and doing really well, like in that scene, I was like, man, I want to poke the bear. I want to put my thumb in the eye there a little bit, because I want to take that same propaganda of glamour that Chanel and the house Chanel has used to cover the truth to actually reveal the truth. So if you buy a coat cut to the measure of your own ignorance, and you buy a Chanel number 9 bottle because you think that I'm celebrating and glorifying Chanel as a brand, but you don't know that there's a message hidden inside that's really trying to get you to understand some of these things. That was the impetus for that. I mean, so the number 9 bottles, like most of them will have the branding F-7124, which is actually her like spy code number, as you can read it in the book. And then they'll have on the labels of the bottle, they'll have things like quotes from Hitler and Goebbels, like these propaganda quotes. Effective propaganda must appeal to the least intelligent. Things like the best propaganda is that which, as it were, works invisibly, right? So it's really, I'm a armchair historian, I guess. You have armchair quarterbacks. Like I do really like history, but it's mainly about, again, my relationship with money. Like I said, I had these different, money is the root of evil. So it's like, it's not right. But like, if we don't look at Hugo Boss, his history with, Nazi uniforms, right? If we don't understand those histories, the whole notion of those who don't know the history are condemned to repeat it, right? So I'm not saying that maybe anyone isn't outside of the realm of forgiveness. You know what I mean? Because that's my whole thing. Forgiveness. I've had, my dad, if you go back to my dad, the painting, I did this painting for my dad in 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series. We're up here in Chicago. My dad's a lifelong Cubs fan, lived it, breathed it, eats it to this day. But my dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive. My dad didn't pay a dime for my art school. You know what I'm saying? Like, in fact, my art desk that I had from when I was a kid, my mom got it from the family store, right? So my dad would always get us video games and the stuff that I loved. Like, I was a huge video game nerd, always. He would get us these things. It was these, at Christmas, he would be buying our love after they were, my parents had divorced. But like, I'll never forget, I was like 13 years old, I think, when I got my first art desk. My mom got me this art desk, but she got it from the Weinberg's family store. And so she got it, and so she could pay for it a little bit. Obviously, she didn't have to pay full price, and she could just, take it out of her check because she was still working at the store after my parents were divorced. And my dad, I'll never forget, I was like 13, and he's like, she got that. Like, he denigrated it. He said, she got that from the store. Because he was so mad that I was so excited that I just couldn't wait to get back to my art desk. And that was the first time I literally said to my dad, "Fuck you." And it was the middle of winter, it's Christmas, and I went out. I ran away, and I hit up this tree. I know where I was at. I can remember it distinctly. And so when the Cubs win the World Series, I hear this whisper that says, "You got to paint that for your dad. You got to do that for Christmas. You got to paint that for him." Like, you have to. It wasn't a question, and at the time, I wasn't even thinking about the film Field of Dreams, which is what I ended up titling the painting, because I was doing an interview with Chicago Tribune, and the guy asked me, "What's it titled?" And I said, I hadn't had one yet, but I'm like, it's Field of Dreams. If you paint it, they will come, right? Because as I gave this gift to my dad, I had on video his reaction, and it started to go viral. And then because of some of the stuff I'd done with my music and the whole price gouging thing, years past, I knew how to kind of trade, economy trade, like posts and stuff like that, to get it to move up the chain. A great book, if no one's ever read it, Ryan Holiday, Trust Me, I'm Lying, is like a must read if you're looking at trying to market and even understand media. Again, a lot of the stuff I was doing at the time, I wish I had the book when I was doing it, because it would have helped me even understand more of what I was instinctively doing. But anyway, with my dad, it's going viral. So the end stop was that it was on SportsCenter's Top Plays, right? So I have this video on SportsCenter's Top Plays of me giving my dad this Christmas present, and he's crying, and everybody, people love it. They're like, this is beautiful. And when they see it, they're saying to themselves, oh, that's my dad. That's my grandfather. That's my uncle. That's my relationship with somebody, because the Cubs hadn't won a World Series in 108 years. Like whole lifespans didn't see the Cubs win a World Series, right? But the reality was that my dad was crying because, not just because of the connection of the gift, but because in some ways he didn't, quote unquote, deserve it, right? But for me, the forgiveness, the notion of second chances it's imperative. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't say anything about, when we talk about being a humanitarian or being humane, someone who kicks animals is inhumane, which Silver Stray is another one of my major things. It's a nonprofit that I do with my girlfriend, the people of Gary, Indiana. That's a whole thing, but I just want to mention it real quick, just in case we don't get back to it. It's a huge part of what I do with my life and my time. But anyway, we see kick an animal, you're inhumane. It's not about the animal. It's about you being a human being. It's about your relationship with you and your humanity. Like, what are you doing? So like our forgiveness has not so much to do with the other person as much as it has to do with us. The healing power, the magic, the gratitude that says my dad set the stage. You know, when they talk about Luke was supposed to bring balance to the Force, you know, and or Anakin was supposed to bring balance to the Force, and they say that he didn't, right? Oh, he didn't bring balance to the Force. He was Darth Vader. He's this evil villain. Well, I consistently say that my dad is like my own personal Darth Vader. Anakin did bring balance to the Force, because without the stage set for Luke, you know, to become Luke, it wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? And that's, again, that's the bird's eye view. That's how we get to pull back, and that's where we find the gratitude and all these things, right? But so my dad is my Darth Vader, and I can tell him that. We've had this conversation. You know what I mean? Because there's no punches to pull. It doesn't matter. It's forgiven and it's gone. And if my dad is a complete asshole, which he still has the tendency to be, then I can withdraw and say, you're an asshole. And I won't deal with this. We won't do this. I forgave this, but then it's not like we have to continue to try and evolve and grow. And I'll be remiss if I definitely don't ever touch on, in 2022, I wrote my first book, and it goes over everything that we're saying and then some. It's called Serendipity According to Francis. It's dedicated to my dog. But the reason why it comes up is because I know later on in the later chapters of the book, I talk about my dad. I talk about my dad through the book, of course, at different spaces and friends and my art and creativity, and my dog, of course. But at one point in time, I write this story. I'm kind of giving you the tea right now. I write this story about my dad that, because it's happening in the moment. I'm writing day after day. My dog passed in early 2022, and I've always wanted to write a book. And I said, you know, writing a book is a daunting task. Doing many things seemed to be overwhelmingly daunting, right? I think it was Seth Godin, I remember hearing say once, well, you can't write a book because you don't sit down to write a book. You write it in segments. So it's like, can you write a page a day? Oh, yeah, anybody can write a page a day. And if you write a page a day for 365 days, then you have a book. So after my dog Francis passed, I was writing to try and, you know, get some of the cathartic energy out. It took me about 3 or 4 days before I started writing, but I'm like, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. This is my time. I'm going to write for 365 days. I'm going to write at least a page a day in honor of my dog, because I know that I'll do it now. And I've attached to something that there's not a shot in hell that even when I was, the days that I was sick and I had a headache and I, wasn't whatever, I still wrote because I got to write for Francis, right? Well, with my dad, there's a later in the later chapters, there's a point where I get to this thing where I'm like, man, you can't, if I write this and I say this stuff, people are going to think less of you. But I wrote it anyway. I have to write it. And it's just completely transparent. But what I was writing about, and I won't disclose it all, but I was basically saying, this is what, if I weren't aligned, if it weren't for like my mom and love and understanding the higher truths of spirituality and things of that nature. I don't mean religion. I think dogma. I have this project with Val Kilmer that I've been working on for like 20 months now. And he has this thing, this God panels. And in the project, I talk about God a lot. And so I have this dogma is the rules of religion, right? And I think in the rules of religion and the rules of God is when we get things backwards. Am God is dogma backwards. So dogma backwards, am God. And that starts to pull us back to the source of us, right? And so all that said, with my dad, I'm writing this stuff that I'm basically saying, if I didn't have this kind of alignment, if it weren't for being in this space, this is the type of thing that you watch on the news for somebody losing their shit and something crazy happens. You know what I mean? I won't go any further into it, but like, it's only it's like that whole notion that we're just one break away from being homeless. We're just one, little push away from just snapping, and I wrote it in there because I'm like, all of the book talks about magic and serendipity and grace and love, but like, when it comes down to it, I understand why people snap. I understand crimes of passion. Like, here it is. This is what it looks like. This is how it would have happened on a different timeline, on a different multiversal plane, if, I didn't have the kind of perspective that I do. But that's a way large tangent from your initial question, Jenny, of the well-regulated militia, and which I didn't talk about, and the Chanel bottles. But the well-regulated militia, again, it comes back to grace. Like for my mom, I'm going to stand up here to grab this. Like for the YouTube audience and the people that see it on video, like, again, I was growing up in a small town, like a redneck town. And 40 miles away, after I moved, my freshman year of high school, I moved to like 30 miles away. You start to see culture shift massively. Valparaiso, Indiana, it's got we got a university and all these different things, and things shift. And then another 40 miles away and you're in the heart of Chicago. And even though I was in this small town, this redneck town, I knew I was going to go to art school in Chicago. So it's like, this is a trajectory, right? But it's based off of my mom always encouraging me, uplifting me. When I was 10 years old and told her I was going to the American Academy of Art, she said, yes, absolutely. That's what you're going to do. There wasn't like, well, what's the more practical version? There was none of that. I never experienced that, But one of the other things with all of her grace and love is this book right here sits on my shelf, and it's The Value of Courage. My mom gave us these children's books when we were young, which also I have to give a quick shout out to Nathan, Sweet Baby Jeebus, and what he's doing for my mom right now, and what he's doing for children's books in general with Fair Share. Oh my God. Again, the serendipity is too thick. It's too crazy to tell. But anyway, this book right here, you say, well, how are you this quote unquote woke? Because this is before woke was a thing, white Jewish kid in the cornfields, but I'm 13 years old and deciding that I want to go watch Spike Lee's Malcolm X in the theater. Like, I have to see it. I went and saw it by myself. Like, I was on a visitation with my dad, and I think they saw like a Lethal Weapon or something. And I'm like, oh no, I want to watch this. I gotta watch this. I'm 13 years old, 13 or 14 when that comes out. And I'll never forget, towards the end of the film where, Spike Lee kind of puts out the notion that, there was potentially, Islam that actually had Malcolm assassinated because of after he goes on goes to Mecca and has his experience and comes back and sees that like people of all walks of life and different shapes and colors are there, and brotherhood and sisterhood, and that he starts to lose some of that, his militance, right? He comes back, and then next thing you know, he's assassinated, right? So for me, like seeing that, I'm making Malcolm X shirts and I'm living in, this small town. And again, don't forget my criticism. Like I'm thinking when I say that, I'm like, man, I have friends. My sister, my niece is a star basketball player, right? She broke the 3-point record last year for high school. Like she's in that small town. You know what I mean? My great uncle Harold, his name is on the side of the gym in that small town. Like I have friends and family in that small town still. But that's what I'm saying. It's like your grandma said some racist shit. That doesn't, you don't get a pass, man. I'll give it to grandma. I don't care. You know what I mean? So the small town has to get, it's Mayberry in one way, but it also has to be criticized. The Grand Dragon of the Indiana chapter of the Klan lived in that small town, lived in Knox, Indiana. Right? So I'm saying all that because, again, it goes back to the notion of just forgiveness and trying to find, I think, equanimity in things. So, but my experience, Malcolm X, Jackie Robinson. So again, the value of courage is a Jackie Robinson story. I just remember as a kid reading this and saying, that's not fair. I don't know anything about it, but it's not fair. It's not fair. I don't have any experience there. I don't have any Black friends. I don't have, but it doesn't make any sense. And so that started that journey for me all the way back. I mean, and so when I look at American history and I look at, again, being in that part of the country, and just knowing the history of racism in the country, kind of how it spans and where it comes from, and trying to examine that further and understand it. That's where the Well-Regulated Militia series was born, because for me, there's a history that's untold. I mean, the first image in the series is, sorry, my camera's all out of focus here. The first image in the series is Frederick Douglass. And it's Frederick Douglass. You can see it in the YouTube videos behind me. Frederick Douglass with Tupac's body. And the title of the piece is The Climax of All Misnomers. And it comes from one of Frederick Douglass's speeches where he says, I'm kind of paraphrasing, which you should never do with Frederick Douglass because his eloquence is of another level. But he says, because I love the Christianity of the Christ, I must despise the cradle robbing, women whipping, slave holding Christianity of the land. It is the climax of all misnomers and the grossest of all libels. So I have a very deep relationship with searching through religious history too. Like if you go into my library, I would say a good 60% of my books are about examining historical Jesus, like Jesus as a rabbi, Jesus as a Jew, and culture and what it meant more so at the time. So when I hear Frederick Douglass talk about the hypocrisy of Christianity, he's calling out the racist grandma. He's saying like, yeah, like we can all parrot phrases, but the Christianity of the land at the time was deeply hypocritical. And so the climax of all misnomers, like I'm the farthest person from well, maybe not the farthest because I use guns in video games. I do have a piece in mind that I've always wanted to do, and being able to say it right here, like those kind of where you just have the big canvas with the words on it. That's guns don't kill people, video games kill people. because it's like we're always looking to scapegoat away from the actual firearm, right? But we have an undeniable, disturbing fascination with guns in this country. So it's like Frederick Douglass with a modern weapon is on Tupac's body is a purposeful juxtaposition that's trying to draw you into the idea that it's not celebrating the gun culture. It's asking you to look at it. And when you talk about the Second Amendment, and you don't know that there are 50 words in the Second Amendment, and you just say that it means that you have the right to bear arms, which is not what the Second Amendment says. It's not by a long shot what the Second Amendment says. It begins with a well-regulated militia. And there's a whole bunch of rabbit holes that we could go down. I don't want to do the history lesson, but that's what this work is meant to call people into, is say, like, what does that mean? What's the juxtaposition of, a musket versus a nuclear warhead? You know what I mean? In degree. And what's the juxtaposition of, like, you can't really see it because it's just the lines on the board right now. But one of the ones that I'm going to work on next for that series, I've had the drawing for it forever, but I just haven't actually started doing the painting because it takes me so long. I mean, the Frederick Douglass piece has been on and off my easel for like 6 years. So, and it's still not done by any estimation from where I'm considering. But the piece back there is actually Dr. King, and he's got a pistol. He's got a 9mm, and it automatically stirs things in people. And it's supposed to. It's provocative. But the reason why I really want to focus on doing that one next is because it's really more poignant for me to say what I'm trying to say without people getting it twisted. I mean, I think in one way, the purpose of art is to let people get it twisted, to let them go down their own assumptions and rabbit holes, right? But for me, I obviously have a very specific message that I want to try and get across to people as well, which in this case, it's very easy because Dr. King with the pistol, people, they balk at it and they say, well, that's almost like sacrilegious. It's that's not cool. That's bad. What are you doing there? Right. And there's two parts. One, the first thing that I say to people is, did you know that before Dr. King committed to nonviolent resistance, that he actually tried to register for a firearm in Georgia and he was denied? Imagine that. I thought this was a God-given, inalienable right for all people. No, that's not true. My best friend, Tony, that I met in art school, started doing the music with, is a black man. If I walk down the street and I have a pistol on my, hip, and Tony walks down, we could both be registered firearm owners. If I walk down with a pistol, Tony walks down with a pistol, the reception is not the same. It's just not. We know this. That's what this series is meant to kind of pull us into, these questions, the anachronistic fairy tale that we tell ourselves, right? But with Dr. King, it's like the second part of it is, if it's not right for Dr. King, why is it right for anyone? Right? Good guys with guns versus bad guys with guns. Who are these good guys? You know what I mean? And what does a good guy with a gun look like? And again, like I said, Dr. King, Gandhi, are obviously people that are really high in my, aspirational influence. So it's not meant to appropriate, but to celebrate the series of work and the body of work that I'm doing with a well-regulated militia, and to just make people ask questions and make them uncomfortable. I mean, you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. It's not easy stuff. And in fact, when I was painting the Frederick Douglass painting, like, I don't listen to music, even though I was a musician for many years. When I paint, I listen to audiobooks and I read, basically, so I can double task. And through the whole course of this painting, I've listened to Life and Times of Frederick Douglass. The David Blight biography of Frederick Douglass was like 70 hours. I know I listened to that entire thing. And so when I hear a voice actor embodying the spirit of Frederick Douglass, using Frederick Douglass's words as this painting is staring back at me, I've had moments where I literally break down. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, whoa, this is heavy. I have to take pause here and take a little bit of a break because this is big. Like that painting for me is my, it's my Mona Lisa in many ways. It's the one. It's funny because again, we talk about Bob, and that goes back to divergent, fragmented notions of me being all over the place, right? But for all intents and purposes, that Frederick Douglass painting for me is like, it has so much meaning and so much history, and it means so much that it's kind of like that's that right now. If I were to have to name one crown jewel of my visual art, it would be the Frederick Douglass painting. My book, Serendipity According to Francis, would probably be my overarching crown jewel because it does a lot of what you guys have allowed me to do here today, which is just go on wild tangents of storytelling. So,
Love it.
Jenny, I know you had your hand up. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I love hearing all the stories. I love hearing all of the really important messages, the way that everything sort of connects. Like I've been writing here as you spoke about love, forgiveness, truth. And I was thinking to myself how it's actually so easy to love lovable people, right? That's easy work. But the hard work is loving unlovable people and what that actually does for us and that other person, and how much we stand to gain from loving unlovable people and forgiving them, and then being able to then tap into that truth that is so important, and then tying back your love of history. I'm a historian. I actually studied history in school, so I resonate.
oh, cool.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
know
I
that. That's
resonate
cool.
another serendipitous thing about us, and
Yes.
and also have a father story, and alcoholism runs in my family as well, and just so many things. But I love that you said that you are not trying to, I forget the word exactly that you use, but appropriate these people because you yourself are a Jewish man, and I get it. It's so important because I cannot tell you how annoying it is for me to witness the whitewashing and the sort of sterilization of Dr. King. Dr. King was not how he is presented to us. So
Right.
really important work. It's really meaningful, and I'm so happy that you are doing it and hopefully educating people. In the
I love that. Yeah. Thank you.
And I love the piece behind you. I think it's stunning work. So I just wanted to share that with you, JJ. And I know you mentioned something about Val Kilmer and Giancarlo. You have a really good question in our question lineup about that, and I can't wait for you to ask it because it's great.
Yeah, no, and I connected also with like a lot of what you said, and it's funny because like Jenny and I many times have also talked about having like strangely serendipitous, coincidentally, like a lot of parallels in our lives and things like that. And JJ, when you were like talking about like your dad and everything, I mean, it brought back a lot of things for me because actually I had a lot of challenges with forgiving my father, myself, and also my stepfather, both two very different people, but for two very different reasons. I had held a lot of hatred and grudges against both of them. My dad for being like absent from my life for many years. And the few times that I saw him, and when you talked about like your dad trying to like gift you things to like win favor, it was like the same thing. Like every once in a blue moon seeing, and then instead of getting like love and affection and quality time, it was like, here's a gift to make up for the year I didn't see you kind of thing. And then I had an abusive stepfather, who for many years, and I won't go into all the specifics of that, but it was, abusive to my mom, to me. And I held a lot of hatred and anger about that for many years, and it consumed me a lot for a long time. And I know in our DMs, we got into like chats about forgiveness, and you sharing with me things from like Jeff Thompson and so I resonated so much with that. And so when you were talking about it, it made me think about like that importance of forgiveness and how it frees us, because when we're holding that hatred, those grudges, it's really more consuming ourselves than the person that we're holding that against, right? And it's almost like imprisoning ourselves, weighing ourselves down. And so I love that you were, kind of talking about that theme of forgiveness, and yeah, it hit on so many things for me, when you were kind of expressing that, and yeah, and I love the tangents and the stories and all that. So it was really nice, and
Well,
yeah,
I was gonna say that Jeff Thompson thing real quick. Like,
yeah,
it made me think when Jenny was saying about unlovable people. Like,
hmm
one of the things that Jeff says that I just love, he goes, just like me. It's something that he uses. Like,
hmm
man, that person was a real asshole, just like me, just like I was at one point in time, just like I have been. It's about that empathy quotient. Like, of course, we got on the fringes, we have the Hitlers of the world, but even Hitler, if you look at Hitler,
hmm
right? Hitler was a failed artist. That shows you how scary it is. If you look at the art critics, I'm sorry I took over and went on a tangent here.
That's
But
okay.
if you look at what art critics, if you look at Hitler's work, now I promise you this, if nobody knew Adolf Hitler and you just put his paintings in the NFT space and said that he's an artist, people would be going, wow, good work, man. You do good stuff. That's good. I love it. Da 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 da. If you look at the time and you look at the critics looking at Hitler and saying his stuff is sterile, it's an anachronistic thing because they know who Hitler became, and then they look backwards and start thrusting this stuff. Oh, you could see it. You could see it. He was violent and evil just by how sterile his work was. It's like, no, come on now. If that was just your neighbor, you'd be like, oh, I didn't know you paint. You're an artist. You know what I mean? But Hitler was not allowed to be an artist. And I'm not saying that Hitler, again, the fallacy though is he was allowed to be an artist. He was weak, honestly. That first no can't, or the second no can't be. You can't start scapegoating people because you got to keep trudging along. You got to keep fighting the good fight. That's where you get to refine yourself. Whereas Hitler, I read one of my favorite books of all time. I said the Prophet is my favorite book, but another one that I'd really suggest anyone to read is called The Soul's Code. And the author's name is James Hillman. He was a student of Carl Jung. And in The Soul's Code, he talks about Hitler. And he says that basically the daimon, our raison d'etre, our spirit, this thing inside of us that's calling us, it exists outside of time and space. And that time only slows and holds back realization. So for our daimon, our spirit says, man, I am Dizzy Gillespie. From the time I'm 10 years old, I'm going to the American Academy of Art. I'm going to be an artist. You know what I mean? But then the time that it takes to get there, it slows and holds back realization. And what happened with Hitler is it became his daimon, his diamond spirit became demonic, and he turned, and it took over. And his big, like, you're going to change the world still happened, just in not such a good way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Wow. So, no, I guess going back to Jenny was mentioning, so that one of the other questions I did want to ask you, not kind of going on a different track, right? Was
no, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you started to talk about it a little bit before, but that you are working kind of on an art collaboration piece with Val Kilmer, and I know you actually brought it up also in one of our chats because we're talking a little bit about music and integrating that with NFTs, and you were like, "Oh, this stuff that I'm doing with him heavily integrates with music." So I was curious if you could share with us a little bit more about the collaboration, how it's incorporating music, and maybe when we can expect to see and hear it as well.
Yeah. So this is one of those things where it's like it's one of those challenging things to go through because at the outset, my friend Randy brought me in. That's how I got the project that I did, the thing that I donated to George Lopez. I don't know if you guys saw that, but like donated this thing to him for his charity. It's a lot about his history. And the George said to me, he's like, you've given me the idea that people actually listen. Thanks for this, and so it was like, that was a really cool moment. And at that same time, when I was out in LA, I went with Randy to Val's studio, and it was before Val got anything on the blockchain, before his God panels or any of the stuff that he has on now. And we were just kind of iterating and talking about things. We helped create this. My friend Benny, who does all the metaverse stuff with me, and all my 3D work is with my guy Benny. We created this like NFT ticket for this charity event that Val was having at his studio, and I was out of Val's studio, and all this stuff was happening. It was like really cool. And if you're not familiar with Val, obviously Top Gun and Batman's and all those type of things, but he's, got sick and lost his voice, cancer. And if you haven't seen the documentary Val on Amazon Prime, I'd highly suggest to watch it. It's the artist's story. I mean, it's such a journey and a beautiful vision of legacy, right? But I say all that because, the initial thought was, going back and forth, I was going to be working on some work that then I was going to get back to Val, and then Val was going to do stuff on top of that work, right? And then I was going to do stuff again on top of that work. So there was this kind of trade-off, like an actual more collaboration as you'd, traditionally see it. But with Val not being well, he's not been able to actually put the energy and get on stuff the same way. So I don't want to really disclose too much about it because, again, this project, I've been working on it, like I said, for about almost 2 years now.
Wow.
But at the end of the day, and that's really crazy, I'll tell you, because not being able to share, like, it's one thing when an artist can't get, we said that money is energy. They can't find the resources that are the energy of money to do what they do, right? That's one level. But energy is also attention. You guys right now are fueling me for the next 6 months. So, you know what I mean? This is huge. It's a huge influx of energy, right? But I'm losing where I was going. The reality is, it's like when you create this work and you don't share it, it's another thing that Jeff Thompson brought me to. Energy that doesn't move becomes caustic, right? So let's look at money. Money that doesn't move becomes caustic, because what happens is a person becomes miserly, they become greedy, and they destroy their family and these networks. When it comes to fitness, Giancarlo, I inspired and seeing you always hitting the gym, going out and doing your thing. Being a personal trainer, I love seeing all that type of stuff. Energy that doesn't move in the body becomes caustic because calories, like sugars and fats and carbohydrates combining that don't get used as fuel, they store as fat on your body, and that fat becomes caustic to your body. Energy that doesn't move becomes caustic. You get cancers, you get sick, you get, diabetes, all these different things, right? So when it comes to the art that doesn't move becomes caustic to an artist. And so in many ways, I have to get this project done, because not being able to share it, the currency of exchange of you being able to experience it, give me feedback, even if it's terrible feedback, that's exchange of energy. You know what I'm saying? Not terrible, like your feedback's terrible. Like for me, if it's that's not what I wanted to hear, damn it. But it's still an exchange of energy. You know what I mean? The obscurity. And that kind of goes back a little bit tangential to my Chanel work, sending some artwork to a gallery and having it be thrown away, potentially lost, the damage to my legacy of no, this was supposed to be seen, less than the money that it would have brought me. It was supposed to be seen. It's supposed to be a part of my legacy. The blockchain is talking about legacy. We're carving our initials into the tree of life, the tree of the blockchain. You know what I mean? That's what this kind of promise is here. So, the energy of exchanging and shipping your work is so important. For people to see it is vitally important. When I look around in my studio right here, I have so much stuff that I've literally had this thought at one point in time. I won't do it, I don't think, but I literally had the thought of setting to fire some of this stuff. And that sounds crazy. And I'll tell you the reasoning behind it, though, is because it's not meant to sit here in my studio. You know what I mean? And if it's sat here for too long, it's becoming caustic to me. It's starting to not look like a portal and a totem to history that we're talking about, Jen, and vision in the world for people to exchange and hear. It starts to become an anchor that says, it's a reminder of obscurity as an artist. You know what I mean? It's like, get out of my face. I can't have it here anymore. So it's almost like it would, in some ways, maybe behoove me to burn it before I leave it caustic to my system. And in the notion of burning, I want to tell one other little tangential story here. 451, I said it was my number. And I'll give you, this is all in my book, Serendipity According to Francis, and a quick explanation, as quick as I can, of what 451 means. I was doing, the music in my early 20s, and a lot of times I would be just sitting behind the computer producing beats and stuff. I was producing this beat, and I'm like, okay, I got to save it. And I knew I was in my early 20s just by virtue of what I named this song or production that I was working on. What am I going to name it? You name it a bunch of different things, song number 7, whatever, da-da-da. I'm like, what am I going to call this? I right-click, save, I look down, and it's 4:51 in the morning, right? I've been up all night jamming out on stuff. So I named this 4:51. That's the name of this track. Well, then I started writing to it, doing the hip hop thing. And it was like, I said, I had this vision as I'm writing, and I say 4:51, my notebook's on fire, quotes my higher self, my throat's its amplifier. And the vision was I was writing, and I was writing so fast that I started to sweat. And then as I started to sweat, the sweat's pouring down my face and it starts to turn to blood. And then all of a sudden I'm writing so fast that the page catches on fire. Then the roof catches on fire. And then I'm writing in the sky with my finger, like this molten elvish script, right? And this was a vision that I had as I'm writing this track that I wrote to 4:51. Now, fast forward a couple of weeks later, when I'm like, 4:51 is something, and I didn't know what it was. So then I Google it, and that's when I land on the first thing that if you Google 4:51, you're probably going to land on Fahrenheit 4:51, which Fahrenheit 4:51, the idea is that, yes, and the name comes from 451 degrees Fahrenheit is when a page would just spontaneously combust if it were in that degree of temperature. So I'm like, whoa, what the heck? I literally wrote about my page catching on fire, not knowing this. So obviously we're tapped into something here, right? So it's 451. Then fast forward a few years later, I told you a lot of my reading is about historical Jesus and examining, what the religion potentially means and where it comes from. And I read this book called Why Christianity Must Change or Die. And it was written by an ex-bishop named John Shelby Spong, like he was a bishop in the church. And he became what he calls an atheist that believes in God. He doesn't believe in a deity, but he believes in God as a force and an energy and an experience, right? And in it, he talks about dogma that we get backwards. And this all applies to the Val thing. Again, the God panel, am God. You'll see, especially when you see the full piece. But so I'm reading this book, Why Christianity Must Change or Die. And he talks about the canonical gospels, right? What's canon? And I've had this experience a number of different times where I would talk to people and I would share an experience about an interpretation of something. I said, wow, that's great. You must know the Gnostic Gospels. I remember one time I was in Barnes & Noble and these old, like, white bearded dudes were like, you must be real familiar with the Gnostic Gospels. And I hadn't heard of them at that time. Gospel of Thomas, Gospel of Judas. I didn't know these things. And so, no, I don't know those, but I'm going to look into them now, of course. Well, the reason why it's relevant is because John Shelby Spong in Why Christianity Must Change or Die talks about a council of Chalcedon that sat down to determine which books were canon in the Bible, right? So Gospel of Thomas was excommunicated, essentially. And if you look at some of the stuff that Gospel of Thomas says, it leans more into things like Jesus saying, all of these works I do, you will do, and greater works than these you will do. This calls us to find more of our God self, more of our alchemy, more of our gold, than just looking upwards, not to worship, but to find the truth in ourselves, right? So Gospel Thomas gets excommunicated. Well, the Council of Chalcedon met at 451 AD. 451
Wow.
AD. And so when I had this vision of burning my notebooks, because I'd also written about this to say, like, knowledge, truth is a burning flame that we can get to, we can tap into. We're mostly redirected away from it, in writing and certain experiences even sometimes, right? But 451, setting my notebooks on fire, my whole thing's like, this is all attaching, right? So I told you when I got arrested, when I went up on top of the gas station, I did that on purpose at 451 AD, because now 451 is my number. You know, like I look at, I watched the documentary version of the Mr. Rogers story, which Mr. Rogers is amazing. Again, without Fred Rogers, there would be no Bob Ross, right? Legacy matters. Fred Rogers went into Congress to lobby for public funding of PBS. And he gave, if you've never seen it, look it up on YouTube. It's an amazing dissertation, an amazing speech. And he gives it to them and they fund him. And if they didn't fund it because of Fred Rogers, there would be no Bob Ross. We wouldn't be talking, probably, right? That's the interconnectedness. That's Indra's net. That's the Akashic record all tied together in a golden thread, right? But so 451, that's when I go to get arrested, right? That's my plan, because now it has meaning. That the Fred Rogers, the reason why that came to mind is because Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, weighed 143 pounds his whole life, almost, from the time he was Mr. Rogers through. And he would measure himself. He would swim every day and he would always go on a scale. And every time it was 143. And if you've not seen the documentary, he gave meaning to 143. For him, 143 was a symbol of his whole life, and it was, I love you. I love you. 143. So after I watched it, I was like, man, 453 is I love you. Then what's 451? Because I've been on this 451 journey for like 20 years now. 451. So I said, love opens eye. Love opens eye. That's what 451, that's my little acronym for 451. And the I being the singular I, the I am, which then again will play back into this I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, Val Kilmer project. But Jen, you came into Fromoville, right? I don't know if you remember this, but I had this amazing moment. We're walking through the metaverse. I felt like I had to rush through things because a lot of times in this space, and that's why, thank you guys so much. I mean, again, I know I've gone on massively long tangents here, but like, it's so hard for me not to. And Jen, you like gave me that space. When you came into Fromoville, I was trying to give you like the 5-minute tour, like, oh, and you're like, no, like, well, tell me about this. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I could tell that you wanted to hear more about the story. And in that moment, I was like, it was the feminine energy. It was the story that wants to know. That I was like, that I got to tap into this. I'm like, it was a revelation to me. And then again, that's part of how Frida Kahlo came into now this Bob Ross thing, was from that exchange that we had. And when I looked and I had that moment and I went down to write the note to remind myself, like I'd been writing in Serendipity According to Francis for the past year prior, I went to write that note and I looked down and it was 4:51 p.m. You know what I mean? So you tied to 4:51 right then and there, you know? And then two more real quick 4:51 things and I'll come right back to the Val thing, and I know we're running out of time. I was writing Serendipity According to Francis. And I remember it was after the seasons were starting to feel like they were going to change. We were getting out of winter. She made her transition on January 24th, 2022. We're coming out of winter, and I could feel the days starting to get longer. And I was like, wow, the days are getting longer. I'm like curious. I wonder what time the sun sets, or because I'm like, the days are getting longer. I can feel it. I wonder what time the sun sets. So I asked what time the sun sets. And then I heard the whisper ask me, what time did the sun set in LaPorte, Indiana on January 24th, 2022? The last day, the last sunset that my bird, my Francis, was with us was 4:51 p.m. You can't make that up. Like, that's magic. I don't care what anybody says, because to me, it has the deepest meaning that you could possibly, and I have so many more stories. Like, these are just the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. the last one, I'll tell you, I've been working on this Chanel series, right? I'll show you on camera. You've seen one. Sweet Baby Jeebus got the first one. Here's one of them. So these are on board. Now, this board right here is actually the pieces that I did that I sent to the gallery in Palm Beach that were, I think, thrown away from negligence. There's a whole story there. I mean, again, you can see it on the website, but I cease and desist. Don't talk about the truth of what happened to you. You know, all these kind of crazy things. But this is the alchemy, and you obviously can see the gold on this. I have this in LaPorte, where I live. There's this, it's called the Exchange, and it's an extension of the library. And I've discovered this process that I'm doing with this laser etcher, that I'm literally able to take the boards and my old work and the stuff that was lost and resurrect it onto the same exact board that it was on, right? And then redo the painting of this. I still have to do work on top of it, but there's so much alchemy in it, right? And so when I had it, I had these scraps left over from the one that Nathan, Sweet Baby Jeebus, has. It was on it's a 6-inch by 6-inch piece of the same wood that these other pieces were cut from that are thrown away. And as I'm looking at this laser etcher, like, I'm learning it. It's another tool, right? So you change the power of the laser to change the depth. You change the speed at which the laser goes through to change the depth. You do all these different things. And I'm going back. Should I do 15%? Should I do 20%? I don't know what I want to do. Like, I'm going to do it 20. No, let me do it 15. I look at the time elapsed, right? And you can imagine, when I was trying to make this decision, I go, and I'm right before I was about to switch it over to 15% or whatever it was, I look at the time that it would take to do this print, and it was 4 minutes and 51 seconds. And I said, well, that's the answer. That's what I'm doing, right? So that's why, if you look at that collection as it's going to play out, those are on Object on Tezos, because that's another big thing. Like, I did get accepted to speak at NFT NYC again. I saw you were as well, Jenny. I don't know if you are, Giancarlo, but like, that's going to be an awesome moment again to be all in. But next year, I'm not going to be on a panel, that I did submit for a solo talk this time. And the title that I submitted and the thesis that I want to do is to sell your story, not your NFTs, right? And what I'm saying that is, like, if we rely on just markets, right, we don't rely on ourselves, we can run into some big problems. And I say all that because, you know, I know there are people who clap back against, well, Object and Tezos is just for the cheap art. It's for the throwaway stuff or the collectibles or the whatever. You know what I mean? And it's like the platform, it's the story and the person behind it. You know what I mean? Sweet Baby paid 2,700 Tez for this piece. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter where it's at. It matters what the story is behind it, right? So the collection, all of the prints that I will do from that, the laser does the etching, and then I do the embellishing and the painting on top of it, and the gold foil and the little gemstones and all that stuff. All of those will be those are in the 451 collection that it just spawned because of, you know, the way that the universe works and the magic. But all of that said, the Val Kilmer project, its title is, what I'm calling the piece of artwork itself is a multimedia etherealization triptych, which sounds absolutely insane. And it's meant to, because, again, we could go through a whole hour conversation just about what this piece is and what it means to me and how it's spawned a bunch of different things. But one of the things to your question, and I'm coming back to it, is how does the music integrate? Well, I had written a song in, I think it was 2001, somewhere around that time frame. And I never recorded it. A lot of times, your early work is, like, again, cringy. You're like, oh God, like, I have songs that are cringy. I have paintings and drawings that are cringy. Like, oh, but you got to go through that process, right? But for whatever reason, I was just inspired and moved. And this song, it's not like a pop song by any stretch of the imagination, but metaphysically, it was like a Nights in White Satin, moody blues kind of, like, deeply spiritual type of song that I was like, yeah, this is a good song. But I never recorded it because it wasn't really poppy or anything, I didn't ever play it out with the band. But then when it came to this multimedia etherealization triptych, I'm your Huckleberry ... Finn, I was like, that's it. Like, I need to record this song now. So I recorded that song for this piece, and man, it's, again, when it releases, I will definitely, you guys will be among the first to know, because I want to hear what you think about it and to experience it and see it. But it's, I used to cringe when I would hear people say that they're crypto artists, because I'm like, well, I never called myself a fiat artist. Like, that's just the currency, right? But what I do with this I'm Your Huckleberry Finn piece is using the blockchain as a brush, as a canvas. It literally is using the blockchain as a constellation, as an Akashic record, as Indra's net, and it's a metaphor within itself. It'll be really too hard to explain. We wouldn't have enough time even if I did want to do, but that'll be something I want to do as we release it. But the music behind it, I also borrowed from another song. So I had this other hip hop song that was called I Am. And that's the kind of concept that I wanted to explore with this piece. Exodus 3:14, when Moses is talking to God, he says, I am that I am. I am. And it's like, the notion is that the actor, says, I am. Val Kilmer says, I am Doc Holliday. And then he becomes Doc Holliday. I am Mark Twain. And then he becomes Mark Twain. But the eyes are the window to the soul as a portal. If you see this, I have this triptych of Val is a young man, Val is Doc Holliday, Val is Mark Twain. If you look at this, you look at those eyes, the window of the soul, the eyes never change. So whose soul? So what is the I am? And this, so then I started thinking more and more about, we all played these roles, father, mother, NFT expert, host, artist, employee, boss, all these different roles. We put on these roles, we put on masks. Then it takes me back to Bob. Bob's afro was a mask. Bob's got different masks. Now he's Steve Jobs. Now he's Van Gogh. To me, like, the points of articulation are so infinite. It would take me so long to really, really lay it out there. But I really feel like this piece, the I'm Your Huckleberry Finn, the subtitle of it is that the actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts. And it's not even really, it's about Val, but it could be Robin Williams. You know what I mean? In some ways it could, except for the fact that the way that I discovered to collaborate more specifically with Val's vision, since he couldn't be physically on the work, was to use the digital to make him physical. It's mind-blowing. I'm just telling you, there's not, they say that whole thing, like everything in art has been done before in music. And for the most part, yes, but I'm telling you, this one's something weird. It's kind of extraordinary. And it's because I became a witness to it. That's why it took so long. I had the portraits done, you know what I mean? The portraits to draw were easy, but it's not about the portraits. It was like the portraits had to look at me for a long time, and I had to keep having this conversation. The very first NFT, I'll give you a little bit of where this goes as far as what the etherealization part of it means and how I use the blockchain. The very first NFT I ever sold, not a lot of people know this, was I think in March or April of 2021. And it was called an NFT. It was a non-feelable tickle. And what it was is basically a video of me. I was basically making parodies of the space from the very beginning, but not because I was making fun of it in the sense of that I didn't think it had value. Contrary, obviously. But I was saying, some of the headlines I had imagined if it would have went the way I thought it might have gone was, artist says NFTs are no laughing matter, laughing all the way to the bank, right? And it's just this video of me doing kind of like this interaction and say, if you're laughing at me or if you're laughing with me, then this is a non-feelable tickle. It made you laugh. It works, right? And so I had a limited edition, and then I had a one of one. And if you look at the way that I did that, essentially all of the limited editions, because this was before OpenSea would allow you, because I had lazy minted them, would allow you to do editions. So I had to literally lazy mint 10 limited editions and then the one digital original. Because like, well, what does it mean to be a digital original? Now we, as on the blockchain, you say, well, if we just put it on and it's a one of one, then it's the digital original, right? But I was trying to go a step further. So if you look at all of the non-fillable tickles that I had minted at that time, they have a QR code on them. And each one of those QR codes, if you scan it, points to the digital original, which is slightly different, but mainly the same video. So that's how I kind of made a layer within the blockchain itself, right? And I mean, I sold, I think 3 of those. So I made, and I was selling them for $1,000 each. So I made $3,000 on non-feelable tickles in 2021 early. But that is kind of the impetus for the idea for the way that I'm connecting physical canvases with like near field communication chips and blockchain, and the blockchain pointing back to itself, and how that the idea that something can be digital, become physical, and then return to the digital is very analogous to we begin in spirit, we become physical, and then we return to spirit again. So that's the kind of, the main theme of what that piece will be. I'm thinking first quarter of 2024. We're working on Jenna Armand, Boris Walks Alone. She's really helping me with this particular project and figuring out all the ways and avenues of what we want to do with it. I know Michelle from Beyond Baroque was in the audience earlier. I don't know if she's still here, but one of the canvases I want to donate to Beyond Baroque. There's a whole thing, the Mark Twain section. I want to go to Val's Twain Mania. So there's a lot of stuff to roll out. But ideally, it's like a short film. It's 5 minutes long. The piece itself is 5 minutes long. And so I'd like to have kind of a red carpet event where it's like people literally show up, dress up, red carpet. That's my grandiose vision for it. So,
man, I'm excited. After you talking about it, I'm like, I'm very intrigued to see this thing, and hear it, experience it. So yeah, and Jenny, I know you have your hand up, so I'll let you go.
Yeah, man, I literally have been writing as you've been talking, and I feel like I have found commonalities and threads that link all types of things. So you mentioned something about how we have these roles. And then in the Bob Ross collection that I was privileged enough to see actually in Fremoville, but the whole concept is that his essence is his essence, and then he could be all these different peoples, right? All these different pairs, and he could be Post Malone, and he could be Snoop Dogg, and he could be whatever. But at the essence, it's the same. And then mentioning with Val Kilmer's collection, BIM, and then I just went off sort of like in my head to something that Sarkis and I have spoken about. I know even Sarkis also communicates. Yes. About how we're all connected and we have these roles, we have these names, we have these personas that we take on, but we're all from that same stream of consciousness, right? So we're all just experiencing that same thing. And then tied it somehow to also the fact that you're doing digital and physical and you're blurring those lines as well. And so literally I'm like, oh, wow, there's so many touch points and they all are connecting with each other.
I love that.
I don't think I ever sat and conceptualized the spiritual undertone of the Bob Ross parody collection, which is that we have this commonality regardless of the different faces, names, etc. that we have. And then I also just wanted to quickly mention before we go to the next question that when I went into Fremoville, the part that really struck me was where Francis is buried in Fremoville. And the fact that the tombstone is oriented so that you can see the sunset. And when you were saying that about 451 and the sunset, I was like, oh man, even that, even the detail. and that I was struck by it because I'm a sunset like lover, like I'm constantly sun gazing. But I didn't know, I didn't understand it until you said, "Oh, you know, I faced it so that she could see the sunset." So I wanted to share that with you.
That's awesome. I love that. I have a song I wrote called "Chasing Sunsets." Actually, I know, Giancarlo, you asked me about playing. I don't know, especially after I've talked so much, my voice might be way out. But "Chasing Sunsets" wouldn't be one I'd be able to play anyway because I can't remember the song. It's been so long since the chord formations would elude me. But no, Jen, that's amazing, and it reminds me of another thing, especially as you mentioned Sarkis and the idea that we talk and the time traveler aspect. It was November 5th. I had made a post. I was making a post about Bob because November 5th, remember the 5th of November, right? This is V for Vendetta. V for Vendetta. And I forgot it wasn't until later in the day, but I serendipitously stumbled on another post because November 5th is a huge day for me because it's a time travel day too. November 5th is a red letter date in the history of science. It's when Doc Brown invented time travel. He slipped and hit his head on the porcelain sink. He fell, and when he came to, he had a vision of what makes time travel possible, the flux capacitor, right? Yeah. And so I was like, oh man, I got to make a post about Bob. So I did. This is what I love about AI. Because like I use AI as just yet another tool. It's so funny that artists get so worried about it. It's like, bro, come on, it's a tool. That's all it is. It's a tool. Like I use the hell out of AI now. I paint my ass off, but I still use AI. Why not? It's amazing, you know? So I was able to I have Doc Brown, or I have Bob Ross as Doc Brown, but then I did with the AI, I was able to just do a quick version of making Doc Brown as the thing. And then I just switched Bob's face on that. It's so much easier to just do fast and like iterate, right? So I make this version of that. But when I did it, I think it was when I did the V for Vendetta post, because then I made a picture of Bob, and it's his face with the afro, and then he's got the V for Vendetta mask, because that is one of the assets in the collection. And I wrote on the post, Bob is Legion, right? And I was like, to what you're saying right now, Bob is everyone, and everyone is Bob. And that's what the V for Vendetta, if you haven't seen the film, at the very end, it's basically V says, you can kill a man, but you can't kill an idea. Right? So at the end, with everyone wearing the mask, they're saying we are V. You know what I mean? Because we are this idea. We are the embodiment. So with Bob, it's like maybe just as simple as we are joy, you know, or we are creative. But then it's like you're going through all these visualizations. But so I wrote this and I said, Bob is Legion. And because Legion is army, it's this thing. But then the reason why I pulled that was because I remembered from the V for Vendetta, I didn't know if it was from the film that I was remembering that. I didn't know if it was a quote right from the film, but then I had to Google it because I forgot where I got it from. And where I think I got it from is Anonymous, the hacktivist group, uses the V for Vendetta mask, right? And there's a documentary film that's Rise of the Hacktivists, We Are Legion, right? Anonymous. And so I think that's where I was making the correlation between We Are Legion. But I'm telling you this, I'm not even going to say it. You guys got your phone. Can you Google or your computer? Google, I wrote We Are Legion because of Bob is Legion, because Bob is everyone, right? I wrote We Are Legion because of V for Vendetta. Just Google We Are Legion and tell me what it shows you.
We Are Legion, we are Bob. By Dennis E. Taylor.
What is that? And then, of course, Giancarlo, I don't know if you know about the Afronauts. I know Jen has one of these Afronauts. The Afronauts collection happened because of a happy accident, right? We're early in this NFT space, for us at least. Me and my friend Chuck. Chuck's my coder. He's my homie. He's got the freaking happy little hairdos tattoo on his arm. You know what I mean? It runs in his bloodstream. And we're going through the learning process, though, right? We're having troubles with the minting and how to get the code to work and all this and that. And, what was I saying? I lost it. Chuck.
Afronauts, Chuck. Okay.
So we're doing the giveaways. Well, when Chuck was writing the code for the contract, it was his first NFT contract he'd ever written. I mean, he's going off of what was around, and there was some stuff to learn from, and he had some coding experience, but his day job is working for the FDIC, you know what I mean? So it's like, this is not where he's at 100% of the time, but he loved and believed in the project. So we go and we want to make to where we can give away like 50 happy hairdos, right? So you write that into the code so that if I'm going to gift one to you, I can just send it to you. Well, there was one little blurb in code, one little parenthesis in the wrong spot, messes stuff up. And so what happened was, the way that it was written, those gift bobs that we were going to give away, there were 12 of them because we gave some away. And then once the person bought the first happy hairdo, it sent this whole chain of events that happened to basically these other bobs got locked. They got lost in space. So then that's where the Afronauts came from. I already had one that had his afro inside of it, but then it had a big space bubble over it because I already had him as an Afronaut, but I didn't have any intentions of telling this story. But then I was like, wait, these guys are lost in space. Maybe they just slipped streams. They went through a wormhole into a different smart contract. And, everybody's talking about mooning, but, Commander Buzz Ross says the moon was never enough. Like we got our sights set on Jupiter, like Jupiter. And that's a whole thing for me. Jupiter is a whole 451 magic thing that I would take too long to talk about. But essentially this Afronauts thing happened, right? Because of a happy accident, because Buzz Ross got lost in space, right? And then so I just wanted to tell this story, and it became such a fun, another layer of the adventure. And then that's where Frida Calfro comes in, because she's a commander in a space fleet, right? And it's then I'm over here on November 5th looking up Bob is Legion, and I see We Are Bob, this science fiction story that talks about Bob going to space to escape, to go to the depths of space. I'm like, it's so my life, serendipity according to Francis, all these stories. I talk a lot about Philip K. Dick. I was reading the exegesis of Philip K. Dick. If you're not familiar with Philip K. Dick, you are, but you might not know. Minority Report, Blade Runner, Man in a High Castle. He's a short story science fiction novelist that so many of his movies turned into cultural phenomenons. But, in the exegesis, I never really read his science fiction as much as just watched the films. But this exegesis is him writing about his writing. And in it, he talks about the stuff that we're talking about now, discovering mysteries of the universe through creativity and just kind of something really bizarre and cosmic in the interconnectedness of things and what it all means. And so the idea that I can almost guarantee you that whoever the author is, I'm going to get this book, of course, now naturally and read it. We Are Legion, We Are Bob. But there's no doubt that he had to be somewhat influenced by Philip K. Dick. But it's just another one of those crazy streams of coincidence and serendipity. So.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, we are Bob.
We are Bob.
We are Legion.
Amazing. So, yeah, it's funny. You did touch on it a little bit, but I was the next thing I was actually going to bring up was the fact that you had posted something on Instagram back in February where you had mentioned that 8 years ago you wrote 15 songs in 28 days. And that the last one of those was using this trusty pink ukulele, and I'm a huge fan of that ukulele sound, and was wanting to know if you'd be down to play for us. And you said, yeah, I'll do it. Maybe a bit rusty,
try.
but
you guys got to bear with me. I am probably a bit rusty because the thing is, it's those chord formations. Sometimes they can elude you, and you forget how they go, but I'll see if I can play one of these. This is actually, this was after that 15 songs in 28 days. This is probably one of the last songs that I wrote when I still write from time to time. I'll do things, but I hadn't written as a songwriter like I do in quite some time. So this one is probably I think it was 2018 when I wrote this one, but it's funny because it kind of leans on my background as a personal trainer as well too, because it does the CPR. It leans the notion of CPR and stuff that, you know, if you have to do CPR training as a personal trainer or a fitness instructor. But we'll give it a stab. Bear with me if I'm a little bit rusty. A cold and lifeless heart, she's giving me CPR. My love is on the mend, yeah, she's bringing me back again. She's bringing me back again. My lips were turning blue, my heartbeat stopped, and then she blew like a cool breeze. She gave 2 breaths, compressed my chest. I was in full cardiac arrest when she found me. A cold and lifeless heart, she's giving me CPR. My love is on the mend, yeah, she's bringing me back again. She's bringing me back again. Me on mountains. From suffocation to inspiration, a shock delivered with the ventilation, and it feels right. A cold and lifeless heart, she's giving me CPR. My love is on the mend, yes, she's bringing me back again. She's bringing me back again. Maybe she found my time. Our tempos, they seem aligned. It's 2 beating as they've won. No need to call 911. A cold and lifeless heart, she's giving me CPR. My love is on the mend, yes, she's bringing me back again. She's bringing me back again. She's bringing me back again. There you go.
Woo, man, I loved it. That is awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. So many of my songs, the pink ukulele became a thing. So the band's name was the Energy Commission. I got the name from when I was on the gas station roof, and afterwards I told you I was getting these interview calls and stuff from all over the place. And I got this, what I think was a prank call, but it was really weird because of the amount and the magnitude of the calls I was getting at the time. And it said, this is Colonel Jacob Scott of the Energy Commission. We're shutting down your operation. End of message. And I was like, what the hell is that? You know, like for the time, it was kind of weird. So I'm like, you know what? So what? If this is a real thing, then we're the Energy Commission. So that's where I took the name for the band. And then, you know, the kind of concept of just recycling energy and the stuff that we've talked about all day here. But the brand for the band, it's funny because I still wear it. And outside of the band, it's funny the reactions I'll get. Like I have a hot pink hat. Everything was hot pink. So like my ukulele, you can see this is like a custom ukulele. Everything was hot pink. That was the brand color. But it was because I said, this isn't the one the original one, but I saw a ukulele in a local music store and it was pink. I saw it on the wall and I was like, I was already playing guitar and doing stuff with the band, but I'm like, I got to have that. I got to have that. I got to write a song about it. I got to do it. So the first song was The Man with the Pink Ukulele. And, you know, the idea is kind of like examining masculinity. Because like for me, this is a symbol of the epitome of masculinity, a man playing a pink ukulele. Because, you know, contrary to popular belief, a person would say, you know, pink that's a girl's color, and you know, you can't, like, ukulele is not a man's thing. So I would smash these on stage, like at our House of Blues shows, our bigger shows. I would have like one of the kind of a prop one. I'd be playing on this one. At the end of the song, I smash it. You know, the whole kind of prototypical rock star type of vibe. But the pink ukulele definitely has a special place in my heart, and kind of ethos of and the legacy of the band in those days. But thanks for calling me out and making me play the song, because it's I usually I wouldn't do it. So I did run through it a couple of times after you had mentioned it this morning, just to make sure I wasn't completely going to bomb it.
Well, thank you so much for being a good sport and, and agreeing to play it. So, man, it was, and I loved it. So, thank you. Thank you for doing that.
No, absolutely.
And I know we touched a bit on, Fromoville, and you kind of talking about that metaverse space, and getting the opportunity to also give Jenny the tour and kind of going deep into that. I know it's also you've highlighted it as being like an award-winning, metaverse space, and that you've had a lot of great like parties and events there. I was curious if you maybe could share with us what's been one of the most memorable moments you had in your metaverse space from Oville.
I'll start by saying that it's going to sound like I'm pandering, and I know I can see Jenny probably had to bounce off, but that literally was that I'll put that as at the probably the number one first one was that experience that I had with her in there. It was definitely a one-on-one thing, but it was just the revelation of what happened. But outside of that, some of the other really awesome ones have been. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rizzle, but he's an OG in the NFT space. They have this group called the Whip, and the Whip, they have a weekly like meetup, and the Whip has done a number of events in Fromaville that have been super awesome. We use the Energy Commission Amphitheater, and we can do like this. We could have live streamed this if I had everything set up. Right now, Fromaville's kind of like in an under construction phase, because Mona, where I did the whole thing, Benny and I did the whole thing on Mona, and they went through a new update, and we got to kind of iron out some kinks from some images and stuff that have gone a little bit awry. But all said, it's such a magical thing. The way I look at Fromoville, it's funny because I call it the Bobberverse as well, which again on that We Are Bob, it says Bobaverse. I'm like, that's just insane. I would say Fromoville is like, to me, it is a Web3 website. Like, because when you go to a website, you have a navigation bar. But there is no navigation bar in Fromaville. You navigate the space. And you can find everything from, like I've told you, we talked about the price gouging thing. If you were to go into Fromaville, it's just fromaville.com. You have to do it from a computer because it's like, it's a more intensive space, and they don't have it to where you can do it through mobile right now. But if you were to go to fromaville.com and you go in front of the arcade, there's a bike, which the bike is modeled off of Daniel LaRusso's bike from Karate Kid. But
I love it.
I digress from there.
Yeah.
If you look on the ground, there's a newspaper, and the newspaper, if you look close at the newspaper from a first-person perspective, you'll see it's from me on the cover of Chicago Tribune Metro section when I was doing the price gouging thing. And if you click on it, it will take you down a rabbit hole to link you to some more of that story, right? I've got the Field of Dreams painting that I did for my dad. We've actually developed an entire metaverse, like little gallery just for that piece, for something that I've done and releasing it as an NFT, digital collectible, as you will, digital collectible actually. But you can find that in the space. So like you navigate through Fromoville, and it's got adventures and storytelling, fuel cells from the Afronauts. Unfortunately, that's another thing. The platform that I originally built the fuel cell concept on, it's like a kind of a scavenger hunt game. They actually, because we're in the infancy of all this stuff in the space, they actually kind of closed their shop on that aspect of what they were doing. They didn't, I guess, get enough traction. But basically the technology I was using to create this scavenger hunt inside of Fromaville of these fuel cells, I have to redo that to work in progress, because I have to find a different route for people to be able to collect these fuel cells. But it is like a scavenger hunt. So I would say the events that we've had, like Rizzle and that, and then we also did one. We didn't do it this year, but last year I was able to get a bunch of people together, and Bob's birthday is October 29th. had in a what kind of gallery was those?
Spatial gallery.
Yeah, the spatial gallery.
Yeah, spatial.
So you guys did that kind of thing. So it's like it's different. You know what I mean? When you get to see a bit of an avatar, and you have people like we actually did a special. Like we had banners kind of hanging, like "Happy birthday, happy little birthday." And this whole thing, and we sang "Happy Birthday" to Bob, and it was like a 1-day thing that those banners were even up there, and then we took them back out. You know, so I genuinely believe 100%. Like part of my energy and focus is on building out metaverse because, like I said, I think it's we'll experience things that way to just a whole nother visceral level. Like Jenny, you said how you felt contemplative and meditative and peaceful, and Francis being the first dog buried in the digital dust of the metaverse. It's like all that stuff can and will have meaning. So yeah, Fromoville, the Bobberverse, like I said, it's got opportunity. It's got a place there already. One thing that I haven't talked to you guys about at all is in April of 2021, I also started this thing with my brother, Trash Paint Tycoon. I think Jenny, you've met my brother. You met him at NFT NYC.
He was a trip. I loved
Yeah,
him.
he's an absolute trip.
And was dancing down the escalator.
So, but he and I started something that's been on the major back burner pretty much since middle of 2021, but it's called the Non-Physical Wrestling Federation. And we're both huge old school wrestling. He still watches it a little bit. I still watch it a little bit. But it's just about the ideas and the cult of personality again, and the way that people aren't really conscious about how deeply professional wrestling and the theatrics of it have shaped the world, shaped politics. They asked The Rock recently to run. He probably will run for president at some point if he doesn't right now. Donald Trump on the other side of that issue was in the WWF Hall of Fame. There's a lot. We could go down a whole rabbit hole of that type of stuff too. But the Non-Physical Wrestling Federation, the basic premise is using is basically empowering. The thought behind it is empowering not just new up and coming or potential people who would love and have an affinity for the theatrics of professional wrestling and the back and forth of like cutting promos and that type of stuff, but to really empower old school wrestlers who have created these like personas that, again, kind of like Bob, for all intents and purposes, Vince McMahon definitely would not like the Non-Physical Wrestling Federation, because the idea is it gives a chance for Ric Flair and Stone Cold and the people that like have put their bodies on the line but created these massive IPs, a chance to flex that IP and use it to their benefit to sell these digital assets. And then there's a whole thing and so the Non-Physical Wrestling Federation, if you're in Fromoville, it's one of the cornerstone. It's at the corner of the town like space there. And the idea is that you would actually literally enter it through Fromoville, and part of it, I'm giving a little bit away here, but because we haven't done much with it, but I will say that part of the idea is that literally the NFTs you own or the digital collectibles that you own would be like your seat in the stadium as well. And then so there's a ton of layers to it, but it's something that unfortunately has just had to sit on the back burner for a while because and that's where Happy Little Hairdos was though. 2014, I did like 4 or 5 of these drawings that were going to be the Happy Little Hairdos coffee table book. And I had the vision for what I wanted to do, but it had to go to the back burner because I had to pay the bills. You know what I mean? And 2017, I was a Cubs artist, not even just a sports artist, not even just a baseball artist. I was a Cubs artist, right? I mean, I was doing charity events with the players and the owner. I would do a painting, give it free and clear to the charity, and then just bank off of selling prints. You know what I mean? But like I was under no delusions that I was selling artwork. I was selling sports memorabilia attached to a story, and that's where it's like, we got to find our humbleness, and then we got to find what works. And then, try, especially because I look at like one thing I love to do is talk to people. Like if anybody that's listening wants input, brainstorm things, I love to do that and help whenever and wherever I can. Because I have a lot of experience through the years of, I've like through 2017, I've been selling art as my main living, source of income. Sometimes I have to patch it together with personal training, or I've had to do whatever, things like that. But for the most part, I've created my days in that regard. But it comes with certain chains, because if I can't afford to pay the bills, I got to figure out some work to get done that I might not want to take on necessarily, but you know what I mean? And so in 2021, when Happy Hairdos was looking like it could take off, I was able, and it was bringing in, like it paid my bills for 2021 entirely. You know what I mean? And if you look at the stuff I was able to create because of that, it's insane. And then if you look at what I've still created since, a little humble brag, I've created a lot more with Happy Hairdos with zero resources than some of these projects that have been funded into the millions upon millions of dollars. I mean, I'm not trying to throw shade on anybody, but it's just like, give me some resources and you're going to see like it's going to go crazy because I'm already doing it. But so within that, to that point, like the Non-Physical Wrestling Federation, I have a huge affinity and I know what it could do. Some of the vision that I have and that my brother that we've done and already set the groundwork for, but it has to wait in line. You know what I mean? Even Artunity, that was one of the things I said. I had put so much time and resources into Artunity, and I went through, like, I've won pitch competitions. I've sat across with a plethora of investors at different types of stages. And it's just, at some point it was taking too much from me. You know what I mean? And I had to say, look, I believe in it. It's still there. If it could be any more concrete than being in my metaverse, that's all I could say. You know what I mean? But at some point I have to wait for it. I'm not, you can't rest on thinking something's going to magically happen, but that's what happened with Happy Hairdos. It's like, it was on the back burner. I knew it was something I would eventually want to do at some point. And then when I saw what CryptoPunks were doing with the random assets, I was like, holy shit, that's Happy Hairdos. That's what this is. This space, like, oh my God, this is crazy. And so then I kind of jumped in with both feet, and I had a little bit of a run. And then I got COVID in New York, and the rest is history. So.
That's so cool. And I was actually also a huge fan of wrestling. So actually, when I even went on your website and I was seeing some of the sketches, like where you have like, if you smell what Barack, and you have like a Barack Obama kind of looking like the Rock.
If you smell what Barack is cooking. Yeah. Well, because that whole the thesis there is that, politics and professional wrestling are just, there's so much of it go hand in hand. I mean, it's like the back room, everybody's talking about how can we sell more merch? You know what I mean? And then they go out on stage and they fight for us to root for one or the other. And then somebody buys the Trump shirt, somebody buys the Biden shirt, and it's really about sales. You know what I mean? But if you break kayfabe, in the early days of professional wrestling, it was, kayfabe is the concept that we never break character. All the way up until like the mid 90s, before they started, like, basically, if you're the Iron Sheik and you're Hulk Hogan and you run into each other in a New York steakhouse, you got to fight on the spot. You know what I mean? Nowadays, it's like you have drinks at the bar together and it wouldn't be a thing. But politics, it's very much a mirror of that. And actually, on my website, in that section that you're talking about with the political kayfabe, there's a video that somebody, after I was already, because I did a bunch of sketches, just basic line drawings of different politicians and stuff. Well, right there, that story, Joe Biden and Kamala, that's insane. Like, if I tell you that's Joe Biden and Kamala, you might think I'm fucking crazy. But that literally, we're looking at this on the YouTube. Sorry for people just listening on the Twitter. There's a picture of Joe Biden as Slick Rick. That was Kamala's manager. And Kamala, who is this, basically, it's a freaking racist stereotype, which is the other thing. And Kamala, the guy that played this
role, this character said he pretty much hated the way that he had to do it. But again, it was a source of income for him. But this literally is, the character's name is Kamala. Okay. And the craziest thing is that I was looking into Kamala. Kamala Harris is this guy's actual name, because his name, I think it was, what is it, like James Harris, I think? Yeah. James Harris is this guy's name. So his character's name was Kamala, and his last name, his actual given legal last name was Harris. Kamala Harris is who that is that you're looking at right there in one way. That's not even, that's insane, unless there's something else at work. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is, but there's definitely something very, very crazy. Like I think I said something about 2020 must have been one of Vince McMahon's like fever nightmares or something in some regards. So, but there's a video on this actual page where Eric Bischoff, who was running WCW, which was WWF's kind of counterpoint. There it is. Actually, scroll back down if you're on the YouTube, right there, the one on the left. If you watch that, he distinctly talks about the same stuff that I was saying in here, and I've been saying it for quite some time. And somebody said, you got to watch this Eric Bischoff talk, and he literally goes through how, you know, it's about trying to get a rise out of people. And once they get the rise out of you, they've got you. It doesn't matter which quote unquote side you're on. It's just about getting you animated. It's about getting you riled up and getting your ass in the seat. You know what I mean? So then Non-Physical Wrestling Federation, again, all of the stuff ties together. There's always going to be a point where it kind of comes back and connects. Yeah, that one actually, so if you're looking at the YouTube video, there's one that I have of Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg. And I call it the Vermont screw job. And the history behind it and what it means is the story in WWF is Bret Hitman Hart was leaving the WWF, and he was the champion, so he had to give up the title. And so you have to give up the title, you know, usually at a major event. Well, I can't remember what the event was, but it was like a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania or something. I don't know, whatever it was, but it was in Vermont. It was in Canada, in Bret Hart's like hometown. So he told Vince, he's like, listen, this is the backstage talk, right? Like, I'm the champ. This is your organization, but I've created this character, and that we're in Canada. Like, I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to dump the title in Canada. I'm not going to do this in Montreal or anywhere in Canada, right? So Vince says, okay, whatever. He says, okay. Well, Bret is wrestling Shawn Michaels, and Shawn Michaels is the Heartbreak Kid is his,
Mm-hmm.
The Heartbreak Kid, right? And so he's wrestling Shawn Michaels, and Shawn is instructed by Vince, you're gonna put Bret in the sharpshooter, Bret's own move, and he's gonna tap out. And Bret doesn't want to do this, but we're gonna put the ref on, and the ref is going to call the match and say that he tapped out. And so basically we're gonna screw Bret out of the title. Again, it's all planned, right? This is the politics of inside, where it's like, yes, it's all staged, but this is the backstage stage, right? So now we're talking that the layer underneath is that Vince has to create this thing because Bret refuses to dump the title. So then what happens is they call, they're out there, they're wrestling. He puts him in the sharpshooter. Bret doesn't tap out, but the ref, who's been keyed in to make sure that he taps out, rings the bell. And then Bret freaks out. He spits a hawker on Vince McMahon, like for real. It's not, that part isn't staged, right? So the reason why I did that Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders is because I was a Bernie fan. Like, I've been a Bernie fan in the sense that he's an independent. That's one of the things that I liked about Bernie. He says that he's independent, right? But then when it comes to the national stage, he runs on a Democrat ticket. And now automatically I'm like, man, Bernie, I get it, right? Because, you think that's the only chance you got, but it's not a chance, because they're still going to burn your ass because they don't want you. The Democrat Party does not want what you bring. It just doesn't. That's why you've been an independent, right? So all this time, I kind of liked Pete as well, because he's young, he's articulate, smart, you know what I mean? He like South Bend is like 15 miles away from me. That's where he's the mayor of South Bend. So like obviously a little bit of bias there. And he was in the military, calls himself a Christian, but he's also a homosexual man. Like I like all of this stuff. Just the notion that it's challenging things. And like, again, mainly it's just because he's smart and he's got it, right? So then as he's talking about all this stuff, he's supporting Bernie. Like he wrote one of his dissertations on Bernie. You know, he's Bernie. But then on Super Tuesday, that's one of the things I say. It's like all of a sudden Joe Biden sits up like Undertaker out of a coffin. You know what I mean? He was dead in the water politically. If you look back at that time. You were in Bernie's corner, then all of a sudden, you know, backstage politics came about and they said, well, we're going to put you on this, but you got to, you know, you got to kind of, you got to go Joe. You know what I mean? So that's a history in politics and wrestling
It's
connection there.
There's so many parallels. And can I just say that I was an independent as soon as I could register to vote. I often speak about this. Like I think I've seen it actually because I would go sometimes to City Hall in New York and you just see the politicians who are on opposite
side
the aisle, right? Quote unquote, like just hanging out, just chilling. Like they were planning like when their kids were going to link up and have a play date or something like that. And then we're over here like actually buying into this whole entire theatrical performance you're doing. So yeah, 100%. And yeah. And I have a question for you because I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but I really want to try and ask you this because I thought about it as we were talking about the importance of like thinking as a free thinker and not assigning yourself to these like labels and being autonomous. As a speaker and YouTube podcaster, you talk about this, about your belief that creators should be autonomous, their own websites, shops, marketplaces. Can you share with us how you have taken steps to doing that as an artist and maybe some advice that you could share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, my first NFT sale was a non-feelable tickle, right? And the first 3 sales that I had in the NFT space were by people who would not by a long shot know how to or be in the space. They bought into me. They buy into my story, my legacy, right? So that's why I say, you know, the talk, what I would like to give is sell your story, not your NFTs. I think it's just so important for us to try and meet people where they're at. You know what I mean? And what I saw a lot in 2021, because I would hear it, and I was in the middle of different conversations where like some of these artists who I was already talking to like about Artunity before NFTs, and they have 30, 40, 50, 60,000 followers on Instagram, right? But they're not on Twitter. How many times have you heard that story? Right? Well, I don't have a Twitter. I'm on an Instagram. I didn't really use my Twitter that much at all before 2021. I had one, but I just barely used it. And of course, naturally, artists kind of flock more to the visual aspect of what Instagram is, right? So I would hear though these artists, and they would ask me like, somebody told me like, oh yeah, you don't worry about, you don't sell to those people. It's those, you got to not worry about those people. You got to sell to the people here. You got to sell to the people here. That's all that matters, right? And I was just like, no, please. That is so ass backwards. One of the most, look, there are some people that have made some major success being early in this space. And I applaud them and love them for it. And it's fantastic. But again, like when I said I was under no delusions that I was selling Cubs sports memorabilia and not artwork, I knew what I was doing. I was selling sports memorabilia and a token and a gate into that. Not, I'm a great artist, right? And I think a lot of times that gets a little bit confused because artists maybe haven't gone through certain stripes or something, and they think they're selling the art, but they're really selling, like Andy Warhol, for instance, was a master marketer. I mean, and he sold himself more than his work. I mean, I'm not a fan of Andy Warhol, but he was brilliant at that, and he was also a guest on the WWF at WrestleMania at one point in time. Just saying, and the reason why is because he understood that as well, right? So he sold himself in that regard. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think really one of the most important things is just to find your story. I've talked a lot about Simon Sinek and the TED Talk that he gave, Start With Why. Anyone who has not seen it, I don't care if you're an artist or a musician, NFT, digital, if you're a sweet baby making fair share Web3 thing I'm seeing, all of us that are doing these different divergent things. If you're just a person selling insurance or you're selling computers, you watch Simon Sinek Start With Why. One of the things he goes over is the brilliance of like Steve Jobs, for instance. If you look at the Crazy Ones campaign, watch that. If you haven't seen it, it's like a minute long, and it's this great, thematic music in the background, and then you see a picture of Einstein, a video of Einstein. We believe in the crazy ones, the square pegs in the round hole, because the crazy ones are the people that are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who actually do, right? And you see Bob Dylan, and you see Dr. King, and you see all these people, and at the end it just says think different. And what is that? That's selling computers? Well, that's why, again, to Simon Sinek's point and Start With Why, that's why Apple was then able to sell iPods, because they weren't ever just selling computers. They're selling an idea and a brand and an ethos and a vision. And so if, like, for myself, I don't know what that is entirely, I guess unbridled crazy creativity and trying to tap into serendipity. That's my thing. I don't know how to articulate that exactly, but if you find that lane and you find that thing and you can own it, you should do it. And one of the things that I told those artists who had 40, 50,000 followers coming in, I said, no, listen, find ways to bring your audience in and sell to the audience that you already have. There's no way that you should turn your back on that audience when someone who is giving you that advice maybe even has that space of an audience now, but didn't have it 2 months ago. But the reason why they got it, because they were in the right place at the right time. And that's part of the equation. You do have to be in the right place at the right time. I'm not saying anything against that, but it's bad advice when you're looking at it from the perspective of, what it can sometimes take. My brother's a prime example of that. My brother, he got in not early in 2021, but when I try to tell him, like, dude, you got to understand there's a trash art movement, and he's a trash artist. Like he can't paint. My brother is not like a skilled painter, but his ideas, it's about what he draws you to and his creativity and his unbridled craziness. That's part of the fun, right? So I said, you got to get into this. Well, he did. And, within a couple of months, he sold more work. He sold more work than people that I knew of, artist friends off chain, had done all year. You know what I mean? And it wasn't to the tens of thousands where it was life-changing, but it gave him an affirmation. The problem is it was also a false affirmation, because it was the market that was steering his success at that time. And that's where I say you have to be careful of leaning just on the market alone, because when the market goes bear, how do you survive, right? And like in the bear market, I mean, this couple of these I've never even shared. Like, I think it was in last year, early in 2022, I sold it's a piece from the Well-Regulated Militia series. It's like a physical NFT based with a physical painting. It's Thomas Jefferson sitting on a nuclear warhead with an iPad is the image. And it says, it's called Dr. Strangelove,
right? Like the Kubrick film. Yeah.
Yeah, the Kubrick film. And it says, how I learned to stop worrying and love my slave. And again, I know that's going to punch somebody in the mouth, but it's supposed to. Because if Thomas Jefferson had a relationship, there it is, with Sally Hemings, who was his slave. And it's and at the top of that, this is the digital version. of it and the NFT that sold, but that I sold that for, it was almost $6,000 in the bear market. The market did not sell that piece. Okay. That was because somebody I knew bought it in the story. They bought the vision. They bought me. You know what I'm saying? And where they think I'm going and what they want to attach themselves to. And so what I'm saying is, I will be the first person. If this market turns bull again, that would be fantastic. I would love the quote unquote NFT digital space to be bullish as all get out. But I'm working on my legacy, on selling my story. You know what I mean? On selling, what we're talking about, and then not even selling it. It's like, it's the ways that we say things. I'm not buying it. We say that as an idiom. It's a nomenclature. I'm not buying it. I'm saying I'm not buying into what you're saying. I don't care even if people don't buy what I'm saying, but I want them to buy into that energy exchange that we talked about earlier. Like, here's my work. I would like you to buy into it. And that's why when the stage is set of a bull market to say, hey, everybody can succeed. I was talking to my friend Skojo yesterday about this exact thing, the whole WAG me thing. I hated that. I hated it. I made a thing and I made a post where it said WAAGMI, so it's like WAG me. And then Skojo just yesterday said, no, you should change it to Wang me. So it's WANGMI, which is we're all not going to make it. And so mine was we're all, and I'm not saying that as a pessimist. Again, I'm just saying we got to get away from toxic positivity. That we're all going to make it concept. Because most people don't want to do the work. It's not probable because people don't want to continue to show up. And so the way it hits home for me with my brother and bringing that back full circle to that is that he saw some success in the space. And then when the well dried up, it hurt. You know what I'm saying? Because he didn't like the retweets aren't there, the attention economy isn't there, that energy exchange isn't there, whether or not you're selling, it's not there. And that's why it's like, yeah, so I hope that answers the question. To me, it's like, what's your why? Find it, dig into it, get as deep as you can, keep, refining it and keep telling your story. You know what I mean? Because there's only one you, and like, you're going to have just a unique perspective. That's your alchemy. That's your gold lining, so I hope that's somewhat of an answer to that question. But that's why, to me, the marketplaces don't matter. It's like what breaks down the wall fastest. Okay, if you tell me what breaks down the wall, then that's the answer. So that's why I put the Afronauts collection. One of the problems with Happy Hairdos was this: it was priced at a time, written on the contract that cannot be changed, right? At a time when it was fairly priced for the market. Then ETH shot up to $4,000 a coin. There were 10,000 Me Too projects, and I got sick with COVID, and that was my only marketing campaign, right? So then what happens there? Boom, the floor, just everything falls out underneath it, right? So, and the supply was huge, 10,000. When there's no demand, that's a huge supply. So then when I thought about the Afronauts, because I thought about how I wanted to do the Afronauts for over a year. And then I was like, finally, when I heard it was you again, Jenny, it was you and Shay and Collector's Corner talking about Tez. My brother was already doing stuff on Tez, but I was like, I hadn't done anything yet. And then I was like, okay, I like the low gas to no gas fees. And then I started looking and I found the idea that you could buy with a credit card on Tez. And I was like, oh shit, that's the answer. Because the thing is this, the Afronauts haven't got the full attention that I want to give because I keep getting split by having to chase down to pay this bill, to pay that bill. I still do things. There's some really awesome things I can't wait to share really soon here, actually, that are coming out. But the way that they're going to really take off and sell is when I do it off chain. It's like I've got relationships with people from when I was doing the band stuff, when I was doing like these, some of my friends own this coffee shop chain locally. They got like 5 different stores. Like when I go in and I do a digital collectibles talk, seminar, and showing, I will sell Afronauts because they're like $20, which even on Tez, like, well, why is that $20, right? Some things are only $5, but it's like they are all one of ones, this whole thing. But again, I'm not looking at really, I mean, you got to be aware of what other people are doing, of course, but I'm looking at my vision for this, and I'm like, I know that I've sold prints, pieces of paper of Cubs prints for $30 each, like hand over fist, boom, 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 right? So for me, I have to get the Afronauts to my audience. So I'm going to be doing it at coffee shops. I'm doing it locally. When it really hit me and resonated is I had the FROMO stickers, right? And I went to NFT NYC. We met there, Jen, in person. I probably gave you one. I went to VCon, saw you at VCon later on in the year, right? And I came back and I still had all these stickers. And I was like, why the hell do I still have these stickers? Presumably, I'm getting these stickers to hand out. And these are the events I should hand them out at, right? But no, the reason why I have all these stickers is because I didn't hand them out that much at NFT NYC, because the reality is most people are angling. That's just facts. Like people are, you know, they have their own projects, their own things, you know what I mean? And they have their just different stuff that's going on. And so I wasn't handing them out unless there was a connection. And like, I was like, oh, okay, makes sense for me to give this person a sticker. And then, because I didn't want to spam. It's like, I'm not going to do that. People are going to even just throw it away. I'd rather just hang on to it, right? Reminds me of a Mitch Hedberg joke when he says, you know, most of the time when people are handing out a flyer, they're saying, here, you throw this away for me, right? So it's like, I didn't want to just do that. VCon, same thing. When am I going to hand out these stickers? People aren't really paying attention. Then the reality is I can't give them to people off chain because they don't know what the hell NFTs are. Because the people who had a vested interest in making sure that the community was insular, even though they're preaching about decentralization, they want an actual centralized community so that they can fucking reap the profits from it. Sorry, excuse me, get a little bit animated there. But that's what happens and what happened. And it will continue to happen. That's okay too. It doesn't mean you throw out the baby with the bathwater, but you just have to be cognizant of it. And that's why your shirt, Jen, says FROMO. And I said, the FROMO is real, because I was making a parody of FOMO from the very beginning. Because for me, it's like the FOMO is fake. It's bait and switch. It's those politicians trying to sell you a bullshit thing and then profiting off of your madness. For me, the FROMO is real. It's about my legacy. If you buy anything from me, you think about buying a Warhol or whatever. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get to that stage, but like, that's the way I work. You know what I mean? You're buying a piece of me and my legacy, and in turns, partially Bob and everything else that goes with it. So I hope that helps a little bit, but I definitely am excited about that question and have a lot of thoughts about it. But I do think you got to think about building business. This kid I was given a lot of I was kind of mentoring. I was telling him, I said, look, you got to think about this. If you sell cupcake, I said, you got to find your cupcake and sell people your cupcake. Okay. People buy cupcakes. I don't give a shit. If you want to make it into an NFT, then just sell them the NFT cupcake and then get the cupcake, but they'll have the NFT always. Right. But you got to find what this thing is that you're selling. If you're just trying to sell thin air, which is what the argument was about the right click save JPEG thing, because that is partially what it was. And until Bored Ape even delivers on the promise of something, it still is just that. You know what I mean? And it's fine. There's an economy there, and that's cool. But like, what is it? Like, I'm wearing this hat. If you see on the YouTube, like this hat, I can scan it. I don't want to show up full on my phone because the Twitter space, but like I've got an NFC chip in this hat. And when I scan it, it takes you right to the NFT of a person, of a Bob wearing this hat, you know? And the only way that you could get one of these hats is if you have one in the collection. And so what the reasoning behind that is, I want to cross-pollinate, like lateralize. So like if you owned a Happy Little Hairdo that had a straight out of Muncie hat, which again goes back, you were talking about NWA, Giancarlo, obviously I had an NWA experience when I was young, right? But the reality is Bob shot every episode of The Joy of Painting from Muncie, Indiana. Like, again, podunk, middle of nowhere, you'd think, right? But he changed the world from Muncie, Indiana. So straight out of Muncie. But anyway, you scan this, YVR Trader. Well, shout out to him. YVR Trader is how I got connected to you guys, like in the roundabout way. The 6 degrees of separation, it was YVR. My friend Arts, another shout out to him. We're the ones that put, this Frederick Douglass, we had a digital derivative of that on the blockchain. That's the one that sold with the Warhol and the Banksy and this freaking premier auction house. Super crazy in 2021. Never could have happened. Again, I'm not under delusions that I just would have happened that way. It was because of the buzz, right? So I was in the right place at the right time. It's amazing. Well, because YVR was introduced through Arts and this particular piece, he saw the happy hairdos. He's like, what is this? What is this? I'm like, yeah, it's my collection. It's this thing. And he's like, well, why didn't you say something to me about it? And I said, because it's way different than Frederick Douglass. And to be honest, maybe I'm a terrible salesman, even though, again, it's partially in the family history to be doing that. I said, I don't try and sell my Cubs artwork to people who are Sox fans or to people who don't even know what the hell baseball is. You know what I mean? So I just didn't think to mention it to you. And he's like, well, this is incredible. And then he bought like 10 of them on the spot. And then like he had Gabe buy 7 of them, like, because he and Gabe were like, go check this out. And, Gabe got in on it. And so it's like, but YVR is like, then I saw YVR doing the Collector's Corner early on with you and Shay and Paymon and everybody. And it was like, man, and then that's how I met Nathan. And then Nathan is like doing something absolutely incredible. I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, but Nathan, I have to say, he's doing with my mom's children's book. It's something that we've been trying to do for 15 years. And it was just incredible. And I literally, not only did I not sell it to Nathan, I didn't want to pitch it to him because I didn't want any nepotism on the notion of what he's building. And it wasn't until, I think it was like months and months later, Nathan said something to me about the pitches that he's getting and how painstaking it is to read some of these. And because, people at different stages. And I said, man, you know what? I'm going to send this to him. I got to send him this thing because it's something that was just too serendipitous. The first time we met was in a Starbucks in Manhattan, you know what I mean? At NFT and NYC. And I'm like, he's the first person I met in New York this year. Was it this year? Last year? This year? God, man, this is insane. Holy shit. That's NFT time, right? We're in that space. But so I was like, he had said the children's book and it freaked me out because, of course, like I had illustrated the first version of my mom's book, and we had been looking at doing something with it for so long because I knew how strong the IP was. But I also didn't like my illustrations. Like I was like, these aren't going to serve the book. It needs something else. Anyway, all that said, I didn't say anything to Nathan because I didn't want any nepotism. I wanted that all to be right and organic. But then after I heard there was a lot of swings and misses, I'm like, man, I gotta show him this. I gotta show him. And I said, look, I don't care if you say no. You know what I mean? I want you to know that you have full permission because we'd already developed a friendship. You know what I mean? At that point in time, Nathan had collected some of my stuff and we just talk about the amazing serendipity and universal connections and all this and that and art. And I said, it doesn't matter if it's no. I just feel like I would be remiss and ridiculous not to share this with you. And the exact opposite happened. He's all in. I mean, and it's something that's going to be really, really incredible. Like I can't wait. And the stuff that we're working on is pretty extraordinary. And again, it's like for my mom to succeed, like in her late years, you know what I mean? In a way, to be an author, like the joy it's already brought her. I'm in such debt to Nathan for that. But again, it's all like it's arts and NFT and then YVR and then you guys, Jen and Shay and Giancarlo. Now all of these connections. It's just like. It's crazy because I'm very I'm neurotic about keeping those connections. That's what my book is about in so many ways. But it tells a grand story. So I just thank you guys so much. Like, I can't even believe we've gone for 3 hours.
No.
Like, it's insane. Like,
Yeah.
thank you. I mean, it's absolutely insane.
No, it's all good, man. No, it's been a pleasure. I do need to start to wind it down. There were a few other things I
Sure.
wanted to ask you about, so maybe I'll ask if we can do these like real quick.
Yep.
You know,
Sure.
so I know, and Jenny, I'm just gonna go ahead and run through, but like so. I know earlier you did mention about your charity work for animals. Maybe if you can just quickly say what it is, where people could find it, how they could support that.
Yes. No, thank you.
Yeah.
It was a thing. I was like, oh man, I hope I can circle back to that.
Yes.
Silver Stray, if you just go to silverstray.org, silverstray.org, you will see the video that I did on there. Turn Your Sound On. It's a Nelly Furtado song. When you get a chance to watch it, it's a minute long. Literally, just please take a minute of time and watch it, and you'll get to see the impact that we're making. It's my girlfriend's nonprofit. It's called Silver Stray. It originally started, she's been an animal advocate for the longest time, by trying to help shelters and rescues with, social currency, basically getting social awareness through social media and this and that. But Gary, Indiana, you might not be familiar with Gary, Indiana, but for the longest time, it had the unfortunate tag of being the murder capital of the world. It's, we're right outside of Chicago. There was a booming steel industry here for the longest time. When that steel left and went overseas, there became a vacuum, and that vacuum left a wake of absolute disparity. And it's largely Black and brown people, of course, that unfortunately have to bear the brunt of this reality. And in Gary, Indiana, there's a huge stigma, and there's just a lot of poverty. And so basically, Kelly has taken Silver Stray and the reins of saying, we do free clinics basically once a month, and they get microchips, spay and neuter when we can. They go on a list for spay and neuter, but rabies vaccinations, free food. You can see, like in that minute video, like when you see it, I said the Field of Dreams was a thing for my dad. Like when you look at that Silver Stray line of cars, I was able to catch it on Benny let me borrow his drone, and finally this was like our 7th or 8th clinic. You get to see this line of cars, and these are people showing up to just get, it's crazy because it's like the first part is the animals are the gateway, right? Yes, thank you. That's on the YouTube.
Yeah.
That's, oh God, it gets me every time. Like, so I do all the branding and the website development and everything for Silver Stray, and usually running back and forth this 2-mile long line. You can see these are people waiting. And the thing is, it's like the animals are the gateway, but Kelly's developed these relationships with other organizations in Gary, like the Gary Literacy Coalition, help with things like rent assistance or your NIPSCO bill. So it's like the animals are the backbone and trying to keep pet families together. But the reality is, like, what we're trying to do is create, God, sorry, I'm going to get emotional about it. Cause like, excuse me, sorry. Just the people, like, cause I get to talk to these people like every time, and they're just so appreciative. And it's about creating, cultivating, caring in the community. And because the whole broken windows theory, like you go downtown Gary and you see a lot of this like broken windows and the graffiti, and there's the Malcolm Gladwell with broken windows theory talks about how essentially people don't care because they think people don't care. And we're very much the antithesis to that. We're the anecdote that comes in and says, no, people do care. And it's just amazing. Like you get people that are there for the clinic, but then they volunteer for the next one. You know what I mean? And we're plugging just people into resources. And it's a real humbling thing to be a part of, to say the least. Obviously, as you can hear me getting emotional. So thank you for bringing that back full circle, because
yeah.
it's like, it's a grind. I mean, I can't tell you how many countless hours of grant writing that we've done, and to get rejected is so demoralizing. When you look and you're like, you're rejecting these people, and it's not like we're not applying for shotgun grants. We're targeted bullseye on like pet help in urban areas. You know what I mean? It's like, this is a bullseye. You know what I mean? And we've already helped over 1,000 pets with these things to date. This is all since March. Given over probably $60,000 worth of the in-kind donations are great. She's got a vet our vet tech. She donates her time. And it, again, just being a female vet, one of the only Black female vets, of course, too, in Northwest Indiana. It just all resonates. It's just so awesome. It's so awesome. And I believe in it so much. And I'm going to do an NFT project around it because we do need resources. It's hard. Like I carve out countless hours of the day for Silver Stray, and it's like we're not funded. You know what I mean? So Kelly's working an overtime at a job that she doesn't get paid at. You know what I mean? And we just got to string it together. So I do have plans on doing, and I want to turn it more into a collaborative project with some artists too. I didn't get to talk to Skojo about this, but if you don't know Skojo and his art with laser cats, there's a potential I want to do something with Skojo and the laser cats. But in general, I want to start figuring out ways. I mean, I know you guys are both artists, you know, like maybe there's a way we can do a Silver Stray, like thing where it's a split where the work that you're doing and creating is helping with the awareness, helping with raising the funds, and obviously creating work for yourself. You know what I mean? So thank you for bringing that back around. Because yeah, it's funny because a lot of times I've been talking in spaces lately and NFTs and other things. I've brought Silver Stray for like first to the point to where I'm not even talking about happy hairdos, which is crazy because it's like I should be obviously talking about happy hairdos. But it kind of flipped on this one, and I'm glad that you brought it back around. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, of course. I'm glad you shared it because it's, you know, it's a good cause. It's something you're very passionate about it, you know, so definitely wanted to make sure we hit on that. And just last two things was, I know we usually ask our guests for like favorite movies. You did actually earlier in the interview mention that, you know, Back to the Future 2 is a top one.
The top one.
What
Yeah.
other two would be in your top 3 list of favorite movies?
Oh God, it's so hard because I'm a movie person, like big time. Shawshank is up there.
Mm-hmm.
I actually wrote a song called Zewataneo, and I used a lot of the lines from the movie to create the lyrics. Like, I'm on my way to Zewataneo, I'll leave these walls behind, you know. And so that's definitely a big one. One that's not going to be on a lot of people's lists that I'll definitely mention is Donnie Brasco. Is one of my favorites. If you haven't seen Donnie Brasco, a lot of people think it's a gangster movie, and obviously it's based on a true story, and it has that. But what I love about Donnie Brasco, aside from the dialogue, because that's it, I'm like a super sucker for like dialogue and just clever writing and just smart writing. You know what I mean? I'm not a like the kind of jokes, like fart jokes kind of thing. It's like if I'm in the comedy realm, it's like it doesn't work with me. So in the same regard with films, like I love dialogue. And Donnie Brasco has that in spades, but it's really a relationship movie. Especially like, because you know, you're oozing machismo in one way. You're these mobsters and an FBI agent, but you see this relationship that develops between two men, a friendship that again, you know, men stereotypically don't talk, don't communicate, all these type of things. And Donnie Brasco shows a really intimate relationship that develops between, and it's funny because even saying intimate, like you can't say intimate developing between two men. What does that mean? You know what I mean? This is like life or death reality. And then of course it's also about his relationship at home. Like, it's a love story to me. It's about his marriage and the effects on his life. But I'm always a sucker for based on true story movies. I love that stuff because it's like it's so inspiring. Like the Joy Mangano, what's that movie about Joy Mangano? What's it called? The Jennifer. What's the Hunger Games girl?
Jennifer Lawrence. Yeah.
Jennifer Lawrence. She plays her. It's about her story, like the mop that she develops and selling on QVC. That's, I mean, like if you're an entrepreneur, you got to watch that. Like that's a heavy
Joy,
hitter.
I think.
Tombstone, I love because
Joy?
of the dialogue.
Think, or
Joy.
Right?
Joy. Joy. Yeah. So that's a great one. But Tombstone, I love that one. And dialogue again. All the Teen Wolf, all the 80s, like those Teen Wolf, Karate Kid. But Back to the Future is different because it's like it takes us into a whole journey of things. Never Ending Story is a huge one. Basically, going to Happy Little Hairdos collection and look at the shit that's in the collection. You know, there's a never-ending story. You know, NFT. There's definitely a, you know, Karate Kid. There's all those type of things. So, but I definitely love film, and the Val Kilmer thing in this, when we can talk about that at some point in time and you see that release, you'll see that it's like, because I'm looking at the notion of it as a legacy thing and a just the way that stories are told and we put on roles, you know. So it's a metaphysical analogy for the way that we create our lives. We are the director and the screenwriter and the actor and the character. And once we realize that, we take agency over our lives. And so that's the larger thing there. But
No, I love that.
Mic drop. Mic drop.
Yep. All right. So, and I would love to like comment even more on the movies and all that, but I gotta wrap it up.
No.
So just last thing was, anything else aside from the Val Kilmer thing that you have coming out that maybe we can expect to see from you in the future that you want to talk about? Any other projects or things you got going on?
Yeah, I think one, like I said, let's try and think about that Silver Stray thing. Even people who are listening, like the way that you might want to contribute to that. That is a project that that's way in its infancy, so I haven't really developed it, but I know that it can have legs almost right away. Again, because I can bring people to the space to donate to an NFT that they're not even know what the hell they're doing, but they're doing it for the cause through credit cards, through object. It's like I can, the whole thing is already there. Definitely some more stuff unfolding with the Afronauts. There's going to be some fun giveaways and some things that will happen there sooner than later. Happy Hairdos has always got some sort of development. HappyLittleHairdos.com if people want to check out there. And then obviously the Val thing, but then I'm really the Chanel stuff. The breakthrough that I've had with the stuff that I'm doing. I'll show you. I got this one sitting right next to me, and I'll kind of give you a little sneak peek if you're looking at it here. Like some of the stuff that I'm doing. I mean, it looks like it's glowing, but it isn't. It's literally just acrylic. And I'm cutting with this laser thing, and I've got some really wild things that I'm going to be doing with that. And I have a guy that I'm hopefully going to be doing a collaboration with that's actually got a long-standing success in the space, not in this space, in the art, like the traditional art world. He's really you won't know his name probably right off the bat if I mentioned his name, but he sells work. Like he's a really successful artist selling in, you know, Art Miami and the whole thing. And we're going to be doing some collaboration stuff around the Chanel work. So that, and of course the well-regulated militia, all those things just kind of ink along. But I would say more expectedly, the Chanel stuff will have some more things dropping sooner than later. And the Val Kilmer thing will be a really big drop for me. So.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to all of those. And JJ, it's been a awesome time, you know, and man, you're like a fountain of wisdom, and it's yeah, I mean, it's amazing, you know, and I just love like even when you go off on the tangents and you tell stories and then how like things weave together. And I mean, like Jen was talking about taking notes. I have like a whole notebook of stuff like I'm just like writing down like, oh my God, that's a really cool idea. Or man, I really want to read this book. And Gnostic Gospels. Okay, I'm going to look into that, you know, but you know, it's just, yeah, just so much wisdom, so much, you know, great stuff that you've done, and just learning a little bit more about your story and the collections and all these, you know, amazing things, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we could probably talk for another 3 hours.
I'm sure.
Yeah. But yeah, no, really appreciate you being here, man.
No, I really appreciate it. And I think you, like you said, taking notes and doing that whole thing, that's probably, like I said, the fuel and the energy that gives me like the notion that you guys are both taking notes, because that's what I do. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's fuel for me. That's one of those things that can keep me going. You know what I mean? So I appreciate this insanely long time. I see some people have stuck through this entire thing, which is absolutely also insane. Because I know how valuable people's time are. Like, and that's where it's like, I told you, Giancarlo, like when we first started talking a little bit and connecting more and the DMs, I said, send me stuff. You know what I mean? Like I kind of spam, like I tag you guys in a lot of things like pictures, because literally if I don't, nobody will see it. And it's not so much that I care about the metrics of it being seen. I just want at least some people that I want to see it. You know what I mean? So if I ever over spam you, I apologize. Feel free to let me know. But on the opposite end, what I'm saying is, because the algorithm is crazy and because we might not see each other's shit, like I just share away, you know what I mean? Especially important things. I want to try and be as many places as I can, but with all the plates I have spinning, sometimes I get caught up in, I don't want to be selfish with my time. And it's like, I've already taken 3.5 hours of your guys' time and everybody's here. And so it's like, I always want to try and give back and be in the places where people are at too. You know what I mean? Because everybody's story is really important. And that's what I'm saying. If anybody wants to directly reach out to me, I'm always for that, because I will respond to I'm neurotic about that as well. I respond to every message all the time. And potentially that would be a very big problem if I ever expanded my my audience, because I'm super neurotic about making sure I respond to people. So yeah, I thank you again, and thank everybody who spent the time with us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay. Thanks to everybody that was here, and I know some of the people that were here the whole time too. So much appreciated.
I know, it's insane.
Yeah.
It's absolutely crazy.
Appreciate all of you. Hope you guys all have a wonderful Friday, great weekend. JJ, are you going to be also at Art Basel, Miami?
Unfortunately, I'm
you
not,
can't?
and that's one of those things.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so funny because since 2019, I kept inching closer. Before NFTs, I was going to have potentially in the traditional space in Basel, and I've missed it a handful of times. So unfortunately, not this time, but hopefully by next year, the presence will be known.
Okay.
Not just, obviously, it's great to just connect with people, but being that I have to hedge my bets and my time, and I'm not completely resourced, I just couldn't afford it on time and money this time around. So hopefully next year will be a different story.
All right. Well, if anything, we'll still see you at NFT NYC, God willing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, we'll hang out there for sure.
100%.
All right, brother. Thank you so much for being here today, for sharing with us. Hope you also have a great Friday, great weekend.
Absolutely. Same to you guys. Thank you. And thanks to everybody else.
Bye. Happy Friday.
Care. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Hear me now? Yeah. Thank you again. That was insane. Sorry. That's like, really, honestly, that is my one of my absolute weaknesses, is to carry on. So thanks for taking the time. You know what I mean? And especially that this is recorded, because like the other reality is that, hold on, shit, I muted my computer. Let me turn this back up. The other reality is that this is now part of something that I can have. I get neurotic because I have so many stories and so many things to tell that, and unfortunately, like the abundance of creativity thing is a reality. And then I don't have enough time to tell all those different things. And it's like, it gets very frustrating. And now for me, like the recording of this will be a bookmark and something that, like, when I finished writing my book, I was like, I'm all right now. I don't want to say this in the way that I'll say it, but I'll say it. I'm okay to, if I have to die, now it's there. It's cataloged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can't overstate the importance of what you guys did with me today. For me personally, this is part of that now. Like, this is like, you know what? If I got hit by a bus, you guys could be like, yo, JJ got hit by a bus. But like, look at this. You know what I mean? This is what he was saying.
3.5 hours here of AJ, his essence, his story.
This is what it was about. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, I mean, and it goes back to Jen, like I said, you taking that time in Fromoville, that already keyed me into knowing, like, I got to find the best places where I know that I can feel comfortable telling the story. And I know I can't have 3.5 hours of all people's time all the time, but like, thank you. Because it it helps put to rest some of that, because for me, when people don't know this long story and I've got all these things to tell, it's like there's so much to find, but if people aren't looking, they will never know. You know what I mean? And so this would be a nugget of something that people can go back to, and like family members and friends and people who've collected my work and stuff, like this is what he was about. You know what I mean? So if he does get hit by a bus, this is kind of what it looked like and sounded like. So thank you.
Oh, wait, Jenny, I think I don't hear you for some reason.
Oh yeah, I don't hear.
I don't hear you, Jenny. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. That's weird. Wait, could it be this other one? Oh, that's weird. I see you twice in here.
Whoa, metaverse! Look at that.
Yeah. Wait, speak now, Jenny.
Hello.
Oh yeah, there we go. Now it works. Now it works.
That's so funny. I don't even know what to say. I think that's the thing that I think it's great that we do this, like, you know,
Yeah.
it's recorded.
No, absolutely. That's what's so important. And that's why, you know, like we talked about just the blockchain and the idea of it being like a digital Akashic record. That's kind of what this Val Kilmer project will be more so showing. Like these recordings, they're part of, like, for me, it's like, this is a chance for me to tell my story. And like, you guys just like really just gave me so much time, and that's awesome. I don't know. I'm just massively grateful. Thank you.
You're so happy. I'm so happy. Yeah. Awesome, because you know it's an important story to tell, and I'm glad that you were able to create an environment for you to be able to.
Yes, that's exactly it. You have fostered it and created it, and get just that like that's outer space for me. You know what I mean? That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's our pleasure, man. Thank you so much. I do got to run. I'm actually late for a meeting now. So
oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. But thank you, JJ. Thanks, Jenny.
Of course. Bye, guys.
Talk to you guys soon. Peace and love.